Northern Ireland and western Scotland, with a little bit of drizzly rain coming in here. See a few showers through the day today. They're becoming confined to East Anglia and Kent, but even here they tend to disappear after midnight. But here comes that thicker cloud, bringing the damp and drizzly conditions, but also meaning it will be a milder night compared to last night. So a fairly grey start, though, on Tuesday morning. The rain won't be heavy at all. It'll just be light, drizzly stuff, mostly around western fringes. So perhaps a hint of brightness to begin with over East Anglia and the southeast, but mostly it'll be quite cloudy. Certainly over the hills of Wales, it'll be a bit damp, and same goes for the hills and mountains of northwest England and western Scotland. Again, to the east, we may start off with a little bit of brightness, but for most, it'll be a grey start. Won't be as windy as today across Scotland. A bit of a breeze blowing over the Western Isles, but otherwise the winds, say, a lot lighter than today. Slowly but surely, I'm hopeful that the skies will tend to brighten. We might just see a little bit of drizzly rain drifting across eastern England around the middle of the day, but that should fade out, and mostly the cloud will tend to lift and break, and we'll see a few brighter spells coming through, and it will be milder. Temperatures more widely in the mid to maybe even high teens, 16, 17 possible, where we do see some sunshine. Wednesday, well, we'll see a weather front moving into the northwest, so things turning wet again over the Western Isles, the Highlands, some rain getting into Northern Ireland through the afternoon. Otherwise, again, a lot of dry weather, but still fairly cloudy conditions, not quite as mild on Wednesday, but still we'll see those temperatures getting into the mid-teens for many of us. Bye for now.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
You could be the proud owner of a brand new Benevan 122. This very latest 2026 model comfortably sleeps 4, comes complete with built-in kitchen, compact washroom, and is worth over £67,000. But that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £25,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like in the coming year. For another chance to win a camper van and cash, text prize to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB20 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of May. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
7, this one will get you goat. I just know it will. I'm going to log
It gets our goat.
I'm going to log into your say right now to see what you're going to say about this one. Because the Bank of England has confirmed, and we're focusing on Winston Churchill, but it's actually every famous face on every banknote is going to be removed.
Yes, instead, the central bank plans to feature British wildlife on the next series of banknotes.
They're going to message you, though, or, you know, there's going to be a consultation to say if you want a badger or a horse or whatever.
But do we want badgers or horses?
Well, yes.
And is it the right idea to remove Sir Winston Churchill and others from our notes?
Maybe they need freshening up. They do say part of it is down to security, and that the wildlife stuff is, for some reason, harder for people to copy.
The great heroes of the past, Churchill is the greatest of them, in my view, but there's very many others as well, to give people using that currency something to aspire to. And the sheer emptiness of simply having wildlife rather than great people of the past that tell our national story tells a disturbing story of a country that doesn't really know who it is anymore.
Nobody uses cash. I mean, it's really a completely irrelevant prospect as to who is on a piece of paper that nobody uses anyway. The second thing, just to really wind up GB News viewers anyway, I personally would rather have the euro, so I would probably have an image of Brussels or something on there. That will really get your comment box going. But if we do have to have some image on this, then honestly, animals is as good as anything, and let's have a lion on. But the idea that we have to pick historical figures that people then disagree about, and was that person a war leader, and does that part of the community support that person? It's a nonsense. Let's scrap the cash.
GB News, the People's Channel.
A really important important thing about GB News, and it's brought something completely different to the landscape.
The mainstream is all about keeping the status quo as it is, ticking along quite nicely. They don't want to ask difficult questions.
GB News exists because there is a desperate need for fearless journalism that puts the people first.
GB News came on the scene as a disruptor, and it has always been a disruptor ever since.
Journalism in this country has been a cosy world full of groupthink until now.
Well, the reality is that most British journalists are afraid. That's not GB News.
Journalism is journalism at the end of the day, and we're not here to serve any masters. Our masters are our audience.
We're here to talk about things in a way that have never been broadcast on British Airways before.
Do not miss a moment on GB News.
The #1 news channel in the country.
Very, very good afternoon to you and a happy Monday. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live across the UK with all the very latest and the greatest news, debate and analysis all the way for you and through to 6 p.m. Here's what's coming up on today's menu. As oil, gas and petrol prices continue to soar, today the Chancellor Rachel Reeves will join an emergency G7 meeting to address the deepening cost of living crisis. But what difference will that make? Plus, in what could be the Labour Party's 16th U-turn, GB News can today exclusively reveal that a review into scrapping the sales of all new petrol and diesel cars by 2030 will start within a fortnight. And the government is facing fury on two fronts today as politicians have awarded pay rises to those on benefits and also to themselves. Benefits will soar this week by 6.2%. That's double the rate of inflation. And members of Parliament have awarded themselves a nice tidy £3,300 cost of living payment. The final insult? You've guessed it. You, the British taxpayers, paying for the whole damn lot of it. And a blistering new report by Liberal Democrats has today claimed that phone theft in Britain has effectively been decriminalised, with just 1% of all phone theft resulting in a police charge. Has the old bill dialed out of trying to stop phone theft, creating a Yobs Charter? And our friends at the European Union are planning to launch a series of offshore immigrant return hubs in Africa by the end of the year. Illegals can be detained and even ankle-tagged for up to 2 years should Britain follow suit. And if so, why did the Labour Party scrap the Rwanda returns plan on day one of government? And millions of British motorists will this afternoon find out if they're entitled to compensation for missold car finance deals. Could you be in for a bumper payout? We'll have all the details as this historic ruling is passed, we believe, in about an hour and a half's time. That's all coming up on today's show. Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have your company. An emergency G7 meeting this afternoon is being planned. What's going to happen at that, do you think? There'll be some stern words. They'll be telling petrol companies not to profiteer, warning the rest of us to tighten our belts. There's even talk in Ireland of COVID-style lockdowns, petrol rationing, energy rationing. Let's face it, if we had a half-competent government, we might have a balanced energy portfolio. We might have our own oil and gas. We might start fracking. We might have nuclear power. But we haven't got any of that. Instead, we've got an emergency meeting with the G7. And what do we expect to come out of that? I'm not expecting very much. So, OK, if you're a politician, though, today, you've got a £3,300 pay rise. For what? A one-off cost of living crisis payment. Did you get that? No. Benefits, meanwhile, going up by 6.2% this week. Do you ever think to yourself, the people who run this country are in it for themselves and in it for those who don't do any work, while you, who go to work and pay your taxes, you're footing the bill? Get in touch, gbnews.com/yourso is the way to do so, or scan the QR code on your screens right now. But with no further ado, here's your headlines. It's Bethany Elsey.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon. Your top stories from the GB newsroom at 3:03. Donald Trump is threatening to obliterate Iran's power plants and oil facilities unless a deal is reached soon. He says the US is in serious talks with what he calls a more reasonable regime, but is warning strikes could hit new targets. He's also repeated threats to seize Iran's main fuel hub as American troops prepare for possible ground operations. But Iran says it would set US troops on fire if that happens. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, Pakistan says it's ready to host talks between the two sides in the coming days. Sir Keir Starmer has told supporters the UK would be caught in a war with no plan if opposition leaders were in charge.
This is not our war, and we are not going to be dragged into it. Yes, of course, we will defend British lives and British interests in the region, and we'll stand by our allies in the Gulf region. But we're not going to get dragged in. That's my values, that's my principles, and that's what we've applied to our decisions, whatever the pressure and whoever it's coming from.
The rising tensions are already hitting global markets, with oil now above $115 a barrel. Iran's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz is disrupting the vital route for global oil and gas supplies, pushing up costs worldwide. Here in the UK, the Prime Minister is meeting senior figures from energy, shipping and finance. Ministers insist fuel supplies remain stable, but petrol prices have already risen sharply. The Conservatives want drivers to be given immediate relief, but the Shadow Energy Secretary Claire Coutinho says the Chancellor should scrap a planned fuel duty rise.
The most important thing that people are worrying about when it comes to petrol prices is why on earth Rachel Reeves will be planning to increase fuel duty for the first time in 15 years in the autumn. So that's what we would like to see stopped. We kept fuel duty frozen for 15 years, and this is the exact wrong time to start increasing it, because you're just making life worse for people who are already struggling.
BBC Radio 2 presenter Scott Mills has been sacked following allegations about his personal conduct. In a statement, the Director of Music says the BBC does not comment on individual cases, but confirmed he's no longer contracted. His shock exit comes after he signed off his breakfast show last week, saying he'd be back tomorrow. Mills was then replaced the following morning, with colleagues saying they had no further information. The 53-year-old had been hosting the Radio 2 breakfast show since January last year, taking over from Zoe Ball. He'd previously presented the afternoon slot and spent years on Radio 1. Counter-terror police are now involved in an investigation in Derby after a car hit pedestrians in the city centre. 7 people were seriously injured and taken to hospital. 2 of them have since been released. A 36-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder and remains in police custody. Officers say they're keeping an open mind about the motive. A group of Labour MPs in rural seats are calling for a shake-up in food labelling to make it easier for shoppers to back British farmers. The Labour Rural Research Group wants an Australian-style system showing how much of a product actually comes from the UK. The MPs say British farms are facing a perfect storm of higher costs, tighter regulation and tougher competition from abroad. They're also calling for welfare standards on imports and stronger powers for the supermarket watchdog. You're up to date for now. Let's have a look at today's markets.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
The pound will buy you $1.32 and €1.15. The price of gold is £3,434.60 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 10,078 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Bethany. Now, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, today will meet industry bosses as fears grow that the Iran war could continue to escalate. Oil prices have surged after Donald Trump suggested the United States could seize Iran's key Carg Island export hub. And the escalating situation in the Middle East has been impacting British politics, as it was announced earlier today that ministers also order a review into the 2030 ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel vehicles, which is set to start within a fortnight, and that could be the government's 16th U-turn. Well, earlier on today, Keir Starmer said he's meeting firm leaders to discuss the most effective ways to keep energy costs down.
Day number 10, you're hosting a summit for energy, shipping and insurance companies. What do you want from that? Are you looking at fuel rationing like they are in Ireland, Germany, Spain, Australia? Or where they're also looking at cutting fuel duty? What reassurance can you give that the pumps won't run dry this summer?
Well, we're bringing together the shipping sector, insurance and energy, because obviously that's a focus of concern. a lot of discussion about the Straits of Hormuz and what we can do to get the Straits opened, which is the single most effective way to bring energy prices down. But a wide-ranging discussion. It'll then feed in. I will have a Cobra tomorrow, another Cobra, to look at the economic impacts of the war and making sure that everything that we need to have in place, everything is monitored and audited properly. So this will feed into that tomorrow, but it'll be a very good roundtable this afternoon to discuss with the key sectors the impact on them and what we can do on it and what we can do together.
And your advice for motorists on the pumps?
Well, look, I recognise the concern that this is causing people. Fuel duty is frozen until September, and the advice from the various sectors is just normal use, no need to do anything other than what's normal, but obviously we're bearing down on energy costs. The single most important thing we can do is to de-escalate and to get the Straits of Hormuz open, and that's why I'm putting so much effort into that aspect.
On that de-escalation then, are you looking at deploying UK troops somehow on the ground in the Iran war? Obviously the US look like going towards that goal.
This is not our war and we're not going to get drawn into it. What we have done is taken defensive action. So we've had our pilots up in the air since an hour or two after this war started, defending British lives, British interests, and of course our allies in the region. We're allowing our bases to be used for defensive action to protect British lives and British interests and our allies in the region. And we are looking to see what we can do in the Straits of Hormuz, but we're not going to get dragged into this war.
Just finally then, your plans with France to tackle the small boat crisis runs out tomorrow. What will replace it? A pay-by-results deal?
Well, we're working closely with France in relation to the channel crossings. I'll be really clear, I want to reduce those numbers. Nobody but nobody should be making that journey across the channel in a small boat. That's why we have to work closely with the French and others upstream, and we're having good discussions with them about how we take that forward.
And get a better deal?
Well, look, we're taking discussions to take that forward, and that's good.
That was 2 minutes and 51 seconds. Did you hear a single thing in that guaranteed the cost of living will go down? A single measure to actually help beleaguered British motorists or those struggling with their fuel bills? If you did, send it in. I couldn't find a dicky bird in there. Now, GBNews' national reporter Will Godley is at Bennett's haulage in Reading for us. Will Godley, welcome to the show. Of course, truckers, those on the roads, feeling the burn more than most. They can't dodge fuel duty. They can't dodge soaring costs. It's biting them hard. What are you hearing there on the ground today in Reading, Will?
Absolutely, Martin. Yeah, good afternoon to you. From this haulage firm here, I couldn't come to a haulage firm and not sit in one of the lorries, but I don't dare turn on the ignition. I don't think I could afford the fuel bill. That's because these are gas-guzzling or diesel-destroying machines. They get through a huge amount of fuel. In fact, the fuel tanks are 500 litres to cope with the amount of diesel that these machines use. They go about 6 miles per gallon. But let's come down here and speak to Stephen Bennett, because he's the man in charge of keeping this fleet of 12 lorries on the road. But it's becoming increasingly expensive, isn't it, Stephen?
It is indeed, yes. I mean, just in the time you guys have been here this morning, our diesel costs have now risen a further 5 pence per litre, which might not sound much, but from the start of the year, that now makes it 75 pence a litre more expensive than we were paying.
And all of that adds up, just as it does for motorists filling up their cars on the forecourt. But for you, with petrol tanks the size of these ones here, 500 litres, the price of this tank here has gone up just since the start of this war by £300 to fill up. So across the entire fleet, just how much more are you paying per month, and what kind of an impact is that having on your family business?
Well, based off the latest figures that, again, we received since you guys have been here, it's now about £4,500 a week additionally. Now we're going to be spending on diesel. So, again, spread over the year, you're talking £250,000 getting on for the cost of 3 vehicles that we could put on the road that we now can't because we have to pay this additional fuel rate.
And so in terms of what that means for your customers, I'm imagining they're all going to be paying a hefty fee more.
Definitely, yeah. Like I said, for the first time in the history of our company, we've now implemented a fuel surcharge. So effective as of last Monday was 7%. As of this Monday, it's 9.5%. And I can't tell you what next Monday is going to bring, but it will be higher until something's done about the rate of diesel.
And as you say, Stephen, as we were here in your office earlier, the phone rang, you heard your new price you were paying for diesel, it's gone up yet again. How is it running a company where you're hearing on a daily basis these increasing costs you're having to pay?
Demoralising, I think, is a good word for it, because I end up sort of being the faceplate for the government, explaining to all of our customers why the cost for everything they want is going up, and it's an indirect result of everything that's happening with diesel.
The government, though, have said they've extended their freeze to fuel duty, that 5p freeze until September. That's surely going to go some way to helping you out?
It is, but I think it's a drop in the ocean for when we look at the scale of the issue. I think about 60% of what you pay at pump at the moment is fuel duty. I'm sure they could take more than 5 pence away from that and still have a comfortable margin return, and it would affect every other industry beneficially.
And Stephen, in terms of people at home receiving goods on the back of lorries like this, when do you think they'll see these costs filter down to them?
I think they're going to start noticing it this week, and the coming months it's going to get considerably worse, because again, as hauliers have to increase their prices, the cost of every good has to rise, and then what the end consumer pays ends up rising.
Well, Stephen, thank you very much for talking to us on GB News. It sounds like not only is it demoralising for haulage companies, but seeming like a warning for people at home as well.
Will Godley, Stephen Bennett is an inspiration. If we had people like him running the country, we'd have half a chance of making a good wedge of it. Can you please ask him a question on my behalf? And it's this. Australia has just introduced a 50% fuel duty holiday for 3 months to help businesses out there. Surely Steve Bennett would welcome, in fact, he would implore, he'd encourage, he'd demand the Prime Minister today does the same.
Well, so Stephen Martin at home in the studio is asking a question about what Australia are doing. In Australia, that fuel duty holiday for a number of months. Do you think that's something we should introduce here in the UK?
Definitely. I think we should definitely follow Australia's suit, and a few other European countries that have done something very similar and have a very large reduction in the duty just until costs renormalise. It would massively help not just our industry, but consumers for everything they end up having to pay.
If that doesn't happen, you know, what kind of an impact are you looking at over the next few months?
I can't speak on behalf of all other businesses, but there is going to be a lot of haulage companies that close. Like I said, the margin for hauliers is somewhere between 3 and 8%, and with fuel having risen 50% since the start of the year, it isn't a margin someone can sustain.
OK, well, Stephen, thank you very much indeed for joining us on GB News. Maybe, Martin, that's something they'll be talking about at these two meetings happening today. Of course, the G7 meeting and that meeting with the Prime Minister and energy bosses in Downing Street.
You know, Will Godley, we need to get people like Stephen Bennett in front of Ed Miliband. You know, we need to make him realise where reality bites and this fantasy of net zero stops. Can you please buy Steve Bennett a drink? Magnificent. Thank you very much, Will Godley there in Reading. Appreciate your time. Now, there's great news today. Meanwhile, if you're on benefits or, of course, if you're a member of Parliament, because your income is rising sharply this week. And for millions of people, it's going up by more than double the rate of inflation. That's right, $6.5 million on universal credit. And they're getting an increase of 6.2% at a time when inflation is at 3%. Double inflation pay rise if you're sitting at home on your backside. Meanwhile, there's worse news because MPs will also see their income go up by 5%. And that includes an additional 3.5% increase of cost of living payment. That means MPs, including the Prime Minister, including Rachel Reeves, including Ed Miliband, they're going to get an extra £3,300 because they've awarded that pay to themselves. Does it make you feel great? Don't forget, every parliamentarian, you pay their wages. They work for us and you pay their wages. We're getting not a sweet sausage out of them and they're getting $3.5 grand out of you. How does that make you feel? Let's get my next guest in now. It's the Labour commentator, Aisha Ali Khan. Aisha, welcome to the show. As you can probably tell, I think it's revolting. I think it's utterly out of order. The parliamentarians are giving themselves a fat £3,500 pay rise this week when people like Stephen Bennett there in Reading is going to have to start laying people off because he can't afford to meet the price of his fuel. The government could pull levers today to put fuel duty down. Instead, they pulled a big lever marked fat pay rise for me and my mates.
Martin, I actually agree that this increase for the MP salaries is I mean, they could live without that extra £3,500, in my opinion. But the pay increase had been agreed previously, so this is something, obviously, not just the pay increase for the MPs, but obviously, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, benefit rates have increased as well by 6.2% for those who've previously been frozen. So a lot of the benefits that will see this increase, those recipients had basically no increase for up to 4 to 10 years under the Conservative government. So we are going to see an increase, and also we're going to see the removal of the 2-child cap as well. So families that have children, more than 2 children, they will now start receiving benefits for additional children as well.
The trouble with this is that it's going to bankrupt the nation. We're looking at £100 billion a year on benefits by the end of this decade, and every time the Labour Party or anybody suggests that we cut them, the Labour Party MPs rebel against it. It's going to bankrupt the country, but they don't care. They just don't care. They're giving themselves pay rises, and they're giving their own voters those on benefits pay rises.
Well, actually, Martin, there's no guarantee, there's no direct connection between people on benefits and them voting for the Labour Party. So I think, I mean, if you're in need of benefits, and that's the wonderful thing about living in this country, and you're entitled to these benefits, then you should be claiming these benefits. And I just want to point out, there's been quite a few reports as well. New claimants, for example, for universal credit, they're not going to get the same rate, and the sort of barriers that are in place now to sort of prevent new claimants from claiming, and also the rate that they're going to get, those barriers are in place now. So it's going to create a 2-tier benefit system where previous claimants who are already claiming will get more money, and new claimants will have to constantly prove that they're entitled. So I think that's unfair as well. I think we need to understand that if you're desperately in need of support and help, then we should be giving you that support and help.
OK, Aisha Ali Khan, can I ask you a question on a separate matter today, and that is the Conservative Party.
Absolutely.
Kemi Badenoch has decided that they are backing a ban on cousin marriage, cousin procreation in the United Kingdom, in the area where you are, Keighley. This is a hot topic. What's your take? Is this a good policy, or is Conservative Party playing, I don't know, social engineering here?
Well, Martin, we have this conversation every couple of months. We have a similar conversation. This idea that cousin marriages are responsible for all the ills, and Kemi Badenoch has just woken up to this idea that we need to ban. It's ridiculous. I think it's another way of marginalising and alienating very, very small numbers within the community that are already vulnerable and already need our support. And can I just say, I've a 22-year-old son. There's no way the new generation are going to be interested in getting married to their cousins. I mean, we've had conversations, not just obviously with my family members, but with the school children I teach. They're not interested. So I think this idea that Kemi is suddenly realising we must ban cousin marriages, it's a cheap ploy. It's a cheap attack, really, on a community that's already marginalised. And if you genuinely want to see more members of the community, taking part and becoming part of mainstream society, then let's tackle the racism. Let's tackle the structures that are in place to stop that from happening.
Aisha, it's not racist to point out the fact that in Bradford, near to where you are there in Keighley, about 60% of babies in the Pakistani community had parents who were first or second cousins. That was 10 years ago. But in 2023, very recently, it's still 46%. This is not a few people doing this. This is the widespread social phenomenon, and there are associated birth defects and costs the NHS. Surely it's worthy of at least a conversation.
Well, Martin, I've been talking about cousin marriages for many years, as has been well documented. 3 of my siblings who've since passed away had congenital illnesses, and they died as a direct result of being born with these conditions. But I do feel that right now, where we are in 2026, the idea of the Muslim community, the younger members of the community marrying their cousins it's just not there. Maybe 20 years ago when I was young, and maybe even 30 years ago, it was very common and it was standard, really. But right now, it's not something that the young people are interested in, whether you speak to young boys, whether you speak to young girls. Even the idea of traveling to, say, Pakistan, for example, and marrying a cousin there, it's completely unheard of now. That's just not something that the community are engaging in. This practice has absolutely died out through better education, a better awareness, and also just young people being born in the UK and more interested and following a much more westernized lifestyle, which I think Kemi needs to understand, instead of living and kind of basing her opinions in this Westminster bubble, which I constantly talk about. Come to Bradford, come to Keighley, and come and speak to people, see what the reality is like on the ground, and then base your policies around what you have seen and what you have heard, not based around data that's 10 years old, 20 years old.
Okay, Aisha, well, I'll be having Richard Holden in the studio, whose idea this is, the Shadow Transport Minister, later on in this hour. Aisha Ali Khan, as always, pleasure to have your company. Thank you very much for joining us today on GB News. You take care. Now, regarding the increase in benefit payments, Rachel Reeves said last week, I would argue that the progressive universal approach that we are taking is the right one. £150 off everyone's energy bills, but then targeted support for those who need it most. An MP's pay is decided by the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority. Their chair, Richard Lloyd, has said in reaching our decision for 2026-27, we have benchmarked MP's pay against other responsible senior roles in civic society and similar worldwide democracies, as well as considering our own core principles and the wider economic context. And we gave ourselves a stonking pay rise. Now, coming up next, the European Union is looking to deport as many migrants as possible to so-called return hubs in Africa. Well, that sounds suspiciously like the Rwanda plan. Yep, the one that they cancelled on day one. We'll be explaining more after the break. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches,
from football to tennis in the car,
in the kitchen,
GB News Breakfast is there with the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again.
To start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pearce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
As soon as it hits 11 and the headlines come in,
Late Edition brings you the breaking news from all the front pages.
because the news is going to happen.
So get a head start today.
Patrick Christie's tonight, Late Edition.
Alex Armstrong tonight, Late Edition. From 11 o'clock every night.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Bold. They are under no illusion. Ray, are you a human trafficker? Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get us on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines. The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it? From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos. I'm going to do now, they are throwing things out the car as we speak. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every week there are stories that shape the national conversation.
We'll be discussing that.
And on Saturday Morning Live, we break them down.
Is that true? This is fascinating, isn't it?
The politics, the headlines, the debates everyone's talking about.
And the questions that you want answered.
Do you think that was a legitimate attack for him to make?
What led you to set up this fantastic movement?
You know what? It's a great question, Olivia.
So what are you waiting for?
Your weekend starts here. Saturdays at 10 a.m, only on GB News.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here,
It's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 3:28 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, Germany, the Netherlands, Denmark, Austria and Greece, they want to open African deportation centres in countries willing to host asylum seekers in a scheme which passes more than a striking resemblance to that Rwanda plan. Now, it's predicted that the European Union will follow Italy and Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's tough on immigration policy. Italy already operates 2 migrant detention centres for rejected asylum seekers in Albania, but it's predicted the European Union, their hubs, will be in Africa. Well, let's now speak with the former Director General of the UK Border Force, Tony Smith. Tony, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have your company. This is exactly the sort of thing that you've been saying for years. The United Kingdom should be doing. Deport, detain, offshore, and guess what? They're doing it in the European Union, and yet our government, in its wisdom, scrapped the Rwanda plan on day one.
Yeah, remarkable turnaround in the EU, isn't it, Martin? When we think like 10 years ago, they had over 1 million illegal migrants entering. I just checked the Frontex figures before I came on. They're down to 178,000 last year, which was 25% down on 24. And the first 2 months of this year, they're 50% down. So they've been doing a lot to reduce intake, Martin. And they've been doing things that we'd quite like to do. Actually, they're turning away asylum seekers. We know that on the eastern land border. We know they are funding patrols off North Africa. And, Giorgia Meloni, the Italians are taking more and more measures to intercept at sea on the Med, and yet we're not doing any of that. It seems now, though, Martin, they're turning their attention to removals and returns, which they've not been very good at in my experience in the past. But as you say, looking at some pretty draconian measures that we've been talking about be necessary to deter illegal migration, such as detaining people across the Schengen zone, tracking them, arresting them, deporting them, and for those that they can't send back to their own countries, deporting them to African countries, which does kind of have a familiar ring to it, doesn't it, Martin?
Mm. Yeah, and they'll be put in camps there for up to 2 years, and they'll be forced to wear ankle tags. They'll be tracked. They'll be traced. You know, Tony Smith, if this was suggested in Britain, it'd be compared to concentration camps. And yet Brussels is saying this is a good idea. And the problem is this, Tony Smith. If the European Union, if Germany, the Netherlands, Denmark, Austria and Greece and Italy get tough on immigration, you know what's going to happen next, mate? They'll all plough towards the beaches of France. They'll be coming our way on a Star Armada.
Yeah, my thoughts exactly, Martin. That's what worries me. I don't understand how it is that the EU can get away with this and not get the sort of legal challenges we got. As you know, I did work with the previous government on the Rwanda plan, and we were stymied really by legal challenges, particularly against the European Convention on Human Rights. And yet it seems to me what we're saying now, the Europeans are saying is, well, that's all right. We're not going to worry about that. We're going to do it anyway. So I really don't understand how it's okay to do this in the EU and not to do it here. But as you say, there is a risk that this becomes real and the EU really do start clamping down on their irregular population. I think there's a very large number of migrants in the Schengen zone that don't have permission to stay, and they're likely to be deported from the EU back to Africa or to their own countries. Then there's a very real risk, isn't there, that more and more of them are going to come here. So I think this is a story we're going to have to watch, Martin, because there could well be an impact on us.
Tony Smith, I absolutely guarantee that will happen because it's just simple market economics. If you squeeze the toothpaste away from somewhere where it's not allowed to go, it will find a way to get out the tube, and that will be on the beaches of Calais and on the dinghies coming our way. And here's the point, Tony. How come, as you say, the European Union is allowed to do this, whereas if we tried to do this, someone will probably say, well, I don't like the chicken nuggets abroad.
Yeah, and I think that's a legal approach, isn't it, Martin, that some EU countries are taking now to the European Convention on Human Rights and saying, well, actually, we are going to send people back to places like Afghanistan. We're not going to listen to interventions from human rights lawyers and the European Court. We're going to go ahead and do it anyway because it's in the national interest. I think what's happened here, as you know, with the Rwanda plan, we were constantly facing legal challenges, some of which were the pajama injunction by the European Court to stop us from sending people to Rwanda. It seems to me that the EU are taking a slightly different approach to that, and be really interested to see how the left wing, those that propose human rights, are going to tackle this in terms of taking them to court within Europe. And as you know, the European Court of Human Rights, of course, it's different to the EU itself, but the principles are the same, aren't they, Martin? If they can demur from the European Court of Human Rights on this sort of topic, then why can't we? And I just don't understand that personally.
Well, join the club. I don't think anybody understands this anymore. The lunatics have taken over the asylum system. Thank you anyway, though, Tony Smith, for helping us to try and make sense of it once again. See you soon, my friend. Great to see you, as ever, on the channel. Thank you. Lots more still to come between now and 4 p.m, including I'll be joined by the Conservative MP, Richard Holden, who'll be telling us why the Conservatives are today pushing to ban cousin marriage. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Bethany Elsey.
Good afternoon. The headlines from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister is meeting business leaders in Downing Street to talk about the impact of the Iran war amid rising oil and gas prices. It comes after Donald Trump says the US could take the oil in Iran, including seizing its main export hub in Hog Island, as American troops prepare for possible ground operations. BBC Radio 2 presenter Scott Mills has been sacked following allegations about his personal conduct. The BBC says it does not comment on individual cases, but has confirmed he's no longer contracted. Counter-terror police are supporting officers in Derbyshire after 7 people were injured when a car hit pedestrians. 2 have now been discharged from hospital. Detectives are continuing to question a 36-year-old suspect and are keeping an open mind on the motive. And the father of rugby league legend Rob Burrow has died. Jeff Burrow passed away after a period of ill health. Leeds Rhinos say he was a tireless campaigner for the motor neuron disease community, continuing his work even after his son's death in 2024. You're up to date for now. I'll be back with more at 4 o'clock.
Tune in to GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player, on Nation Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Afternoon and welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow starting off fairly dull and damp and drizzly in places, but it should get brighter as the day goes on and feeling a bit warmer than today. At the moment we've got high pressure down to the southwest trying to move in, but actually these weather fronts are just toppling over the top of that high, and they'll bring increasing cloud this evening to Northern Ireland and western Scotland with a little bit of drizzly rain coming in here. Seen a few showers through the day today. They're becoming confined to East Anglia and Kent, but even here they tend to disappear after midnight. But here comes that thicker cloud bringing the damp and drizzly conditions, but also meaning it will be a milder night compared to last night. So a fairly grey start though on Tuesday morning. The rain won't be heavy at all. It'll just be light drizzly stuff mostly around western fringes, so perhaps a hint of brightness to begin with over East Anglia and the southeast, but mostly it'll be quite cloudy. Certainly over the hills of Wales it'll be a bit damp, and same goes for the hills and mountains of northwest England and western Scotland. Again to the east we may start off with a little bit of brightness, but for most it'll be a grey start. Won't be as windy as today across Scotland. A bit of a breeze blowing over the Western Isles, but otherwise the winds, say, a lot lighter than today. Slowly but surely, I'm hopeful that the skies will tend to brighten. We might just see a little bit of drizzly rain drifting across eastern England around the middle of the day, but that should fade out, and mostly the cloud will tend to lift and break, and we'll see a few brighter spells coming through, and it will be milder. Temperatures more widely in the mid to maybe even high teens, 16, 17 possible, where we do see some sunshine. Wednesday, well, we'll see a weather front moving into the northwest. So things turning wet again over the Western Isles, the Highlands, some rain getting into Northern Ireland through the afternoon. Otherwise, again, a lot of dry weather, but still fairly cloudy conditions. Not quite as mild on Wednesday, but still we'll see those temperatures getting into the mid-teens for many of us. Bye for now.
Thank you to our global community for watching and listening to GB News. We're not only the #1 news channel in Britain, we're chosen by you around the world.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from GBnews.com. On the M74 northbound at Junction 5, a broken down vehicle is causing restrictions. In Nottingham, the A52 eastbound between the A6464 and A6514 is shut, reopening after 4:15 p.m. In Luton, the M1 northbound between junctions 10 and 11 has one lane closed for a stranded vehicle, clearing after 3 p.m. In Devon, the A30 westbound near the A303 is experiencing 15-minute delays due to congestion. And on the trains, Avanti West Coast has major disruption between Wolverhampton and Stafford. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 3:38 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, Kemi Badenoch has suggested that she might outlaw marriage between cousins if she became the Prime Minister. Well, so far, the government have declined to support a legislative ban on the practice, but insist the marriage law is under review. Now, earlier on the programme, the Labour commentator Aisha Ali Khan defended Labour's position.
This idea that cousin marriages are responsible for all the ills, and Kemi Badenoch has just woken up to this idea that we need to ban. It's ridiculous. I think it's another way of marginalising and alienating very, very small numbers within the community that are already vulnerable and already need our support. And can I just say, I've a 22-year-old son. There's no way the new generation are going to be interested in getting married to their cousins. I mean, we've had conversations, not just obviously with my family members, but with the school children I teach. They're not interested. So I think this idea that Kemi is suddenly realising we must ban cousin marriages, it's a cheap ploy. It's a cheap attack, really, on a community that's already marginalised. And if you genuinely want to see more members of the community, taking part and becoming part of mainstream society, then let's tackle the racism. Let's tackle the structures that are in place to stop that from happening.
Well, let's now speak to the Shadow Transport Secretary, Richard Holden. Richard, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have your company. You've been pushing on this for absolutely ages. In fact, I remember I had you on in December 2024. You introduced a 10-minute ruling to try and get this pushed through. Now, your leader, Kemi Badenoch, is listening. Your critics clearly think it's an attack on marginalised communities. Why suddenly has this idea carried favour in the Conservative Party?
Well, it's something, as you say, Martin, I've been campaigning for some time. It builds on work I did in the last Parliament to ban virginity testing and so-called hymenoplasty as well. More things which marginalise and attack women. And this is a really important move today. I think Kemi has been very supportive of this for some time. And the fact that she's come out now and really thrown her weight behind me on this cause is really important. The truth is that cousin marriage exists in certain communities in the UK, the British Pakistani Muslim community, particularly certain parts of it from rural Pakistan, and also to a lesser degree in the Irish traveller community as well. And we know that there are really serious health issues associated with it, particularly when it goes generation after generation after generation. There are also real issues around personal freedom. In the general population, around 1 in 500 people get married to their first cousin. Within the British Pakistani community, that can be as high as 70% in some areas. So 70 in 100 marrying their first cousins. And that has real issues, particularly when it comes to who's actually in control, right? Who can leave a relationship when leaving the relationship means leaving your entire family support network and your friends as well. So there's real issues around control and personal freedom there. And I think finally there's a bigger issue around social cohesion. This is I think this is the problem is this is about clans sort of cutting themselves off from the rest of British society. I want to see that broken down. And the truth is, which the Labour MPs hate to hear, is that even a majority of people within the British Pakistani community want to see first cousin marriages banned, but they won't stand up to the so-called community leaders who constantly ram it down people's throats. And I think it's really important that the Conservative Party stands up for everybody from every part of the country.
And Richard Holden, this practice has been banned in other European states. It's not like Britain is a far-right outlier to even put this forward, and yet the mere suggestion of this usually precipitates calls of obvious things like, well, you're Islamophobic, you're racist.
Yeah, well, that's complete nonsense. In fact, the people who are... This has got nothing to do... This should have nothing to do with religion at all. This is a cultural thing, which certain parts of the British Pakistani community do to control other people within that community, and we've got to stop it. And the truth is that Norway have already banned this. Sweden and Denmark have got legislation on the books at the moment. American state after American state are currently legislating to ban it too. It's banned in many countries across the world. But the truth is, it wasn't really a big issue here, because if 1 in several hundred marriages was between first cousins, and it wasn't generation after generation after generation, it wasn't really that much of an issue here. But when it's generation after generation after generation, as it is in some of these clan structures, all of those genetic issues really come to the fore. They cause real problems. You look back at some of those European monarchies, these Spanish Habsburgs. If anybody of your viewers, I'm sure a few of them might have seen those, they know a bit of history about it. They actually died out because of all of this inbreeding. And I don't want those burdens to be on families. I don't want the burdens to be on the NHS. I don't want them to be on our welfare state at the same time as I want to protect the freedom of the individuals within these communities.
Richard Holden, if I could, a quick question from you, the Shadow Transport Secretary, on the spiralling cost of petrol, of diesel, of fuel today. The G7 meeting, all we're expecting to come out of that is enough hot air to power wind turbines. If the Conservatives were in power, what levers would you pull today to help beleaguered motorists?
Well, you don't even need to believe what I'm going to say, because we can see what we did when we were in government. We cut fuel duty and froze it over 14 years. We cut it in 2011, and then we cut it by 5p a litre in 2022, and we kept it lower all the way to the end of our time in office. Labour are now trying to reverse that cut that we put in 2022, and they're trying to do it in their salami slicing tactics. So they're trying to do it so you won't notice, because they're going to put a penny on in September, the so-called back-to-school tax, 2p on in December, the Christmas shopping tax, and then 2p on in the New Year tax. And they're trying to put it back on because they're desperate to try and raise more money for their welfare spending, which they've just allowed to get totally out of control as they cripple jobs and businesses across the country.
You've got 30 seconds.
Tax on national insurance. Sorry?
You've got 30 seconds. What would you guys do if you're in power now to save motorists cash? Come on.
We would be free. We would not be increasing the cost at all. We would say we've already voted against this in the House. We voted against it in the budget. We voted against it a few weeks ago. And the crucial thing we've also got to do is stop all of these electric car grants, which are currently costing the taxpayer over £1 billion over the next few years. And we've already said we want to shove that money back into the productive economy by reducing the deficit and also cutting people's taxes, particularly business rates on the high street, which will help every shopper in the country, and also ending stamp duty on your primary residence.
OK, we've got to leave it there. It's certainly got a full tank today. That's the Shadow Transport Secretary, Richard Holden. Thank you very much for joining us on GB News. Now, coming up next, including, yes, Easter eggs really are shrinking, but some brands are even using palm oil instead of cocoa. That should be a sackable offence in a bid to cut costs. Is Britain becoming the shrinkflation nation at Easter? First though, if you consider some holidays, soon, here is a forecast of some of the top European destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries, all sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
A very unsettled spell of weather expected across the Mediterranean. Heavy rain here, but elsewhere, particularly across Western Europe, largely fine. The Canary Islands, much of Spain and Portugal, lots of fine settled weather and some sunny spells. But as we drift our way further eastwards, we can see this area of low pressure bringing in some widespread heavy outbreaks of rain, particularly across parts of Italy and also moving into parts of Greece. The unsettled weather is here to stay for the coming days, but across much of Spain and Portugal, remaining fine, sunny with some warm temperatures.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pearce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The thought of war in space now, so forget the Middle East, forget anywhere else, we're going to space for war apparently. The thought of that could only concern the imagination recently of even film directors like George Lucas and Ridley Scott, but get this, a British billionaire, Richard Branson, has recently warned that war could actually be coming to a galaxy not too far away. Speaking at the Spacecom Expo conference, Branson has given an eerie warning that Britain must prepare for war in space and emphasised the need to dominate the industry for the sake of national security. Branson said that we could, quote, hopefully work with the Americans, but be ready to stand on our own 2 feet. With war very much raging on Earth, is speculation about a potential war in space just a sign of an overactive imagination, or is it possibly a reality? Well, with me now is my favourite space enthusiast expert, Andy Lound. Andy, good to see you. We've still got wars going on Earth. Why do we need to go to space and start scrapping it out?
Good morning. There's always been an issue of warfare in space since the first days. I mean, if we want to take it simply as spy satellites, that's a way of actually looking down on the Earth, part of the open sky program which Eisenhower wanted, which is why he was keen for the Russians to get the first satellite up, because then he could declare open skies to spy on each other. And in fact, the idea of using weapons in space is by no means a new idea. If we go back to 1975, Almaz 3, a Salyut space station, the Soviets, as they were at the time, actually had a cannon mounted on the space station in order to test the use of a cannon in space, which they might be able to use, therefore, to take out satellites and other spacecraft. It was tested when the crew came back, for obvious reasons, because it could be dangerous with the recoil. But they did actually test a weapon out in space.
GB News, the People's Channel.
As soon as it hits 11 and the headlines come in,
Late Edition brings you the breaking news from all the front pages.
because the news is going to happen.
So get a head start today.
Patrick Christie's tonight, Late Edition.
Alex Armstrong tonight, Late Edition. From 11 o'clock every night.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 to 4 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, Plaid Cymru have today launched their Senedd 2026 campaign. Their leader was speaking earlier today in Caerphilly, and he said that his party is on a mission to transform Wales.
This is a national mission. This is a mission to transform Wales. Now, the people of Caerphilly embraced that in that momentous by-election of last year. Our challenge now is to bring all of Wales with us. And the bar that we set ourselves throughout this venture will be high, because the people of Wales deserve nothing less. The cornerstones of our programme for government are clear: to bring down waiting times, speed up treatment and create a more sustainable health and care system, to support families with our transformational universal childcare offer and tackle the scourge of child poverty, to raise standards in our schools with a new focus on numeracy and on literacy, and with the creation of our new development agency for Wales to support Welsh businesses and create more well-paid jobs in all parts of Wales. And we will stand up for Wales to get a fair deal from Westminster.
Carefully does it there in Wales. Now, we'll be covering all the other party campaign launches in Wales in due course, so please stay tuned. But moving swiftly onwards now, it's Easter Sunday this weekend, but this year's chocolates may not be as exceptional as we wish for. He writes this garbage due to shrinkflation. Now, the price of popular branded chocolate eggs has risen by an astonishing 40% in some cases, but of course, the eggs have also shrunk. Let's now speak with the artisan chocolatier, that is Lisa Green. Lisa, welcome to the show. It happens every year. Eggs get smaller, prices get higher, but this year they're pumping it full of palm oil instead of cocoa. Surely that's sacrilege.
Well, what's happening is quite interesting because costs have been going up for a long time, and reduction has been going on as well. So your consumers being kind of whacked on two sides. You've got a lot more packaging, which eventually ends up in the bin, but you've got less egg. And the price of cocoa being what it is, most supermarket brands and any mass market chocolate egg producer will be including alternatives to cocoa butter, which are basically shea and palm oils. The sugar content is pretty high and the cocoa content is pretty low. Most mass market companies use about 20%. High quality chocolate makers like myself don't really look at anything other than 30% up. And with dark chocolate, it's about 50%. So I think the consumer is likely to be a bit confused because looking at an egg, it looks quite big, but when you actually open it, it's a bit disappointing and it's a bit thin.
Yeah, it sounds not just like Easter, but perhaps many marriages. Lisa Green, we have to leave it there. Thank you very, very much indeed. You're a good egg. Have a great Easter. Thank you very, very much indeed for joining us. Now, this is GB News, Britain's news channel. Now, don't go anywhere. We're discussing next all of the politics from the Labour Party local election launch. Our man Chopper back from Wolverhampton. First, here's your weather with Alex.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Afternoon and welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow starting off fairly dull and damp and drizzly in places, but should get brighter as the day goes on and feeling a bit warmer than today. At the moment we've got high pressure down to the southwest trying to move in, but actually these weather fronts are just toppling over the top of that high, and they'll bring increasing cloud this evening to Northern Ireland and western Scotland with a little bit of drizzly rain coming in here. Seen a few showers through the day today. They're becoming confined to East Anglia and Kent, but even here they tend to disappear after midnight. But here comes that thicker cloud bringing the damp and drizzly conditions, but also meaning it will be a milder night compared to last night. A fairly grey start though on Tuesday morning. The rain won't be heavy at all. It'll just be light drizzly stuff mostly around western fringes, so perhaps a hint of brightness to begin with over East Anglia and the southeast, but mostly it'll be quite cloudy. Certainly over the hills of Wales it'll be a bit damp, and same goes for the hills and mountains of northwest England and western Scotland. Again to the east we may start off with a little bit of brightness, but for most it'll be a grey start. Won't be as windy as today across Scotland. A bit of a breeze blowing over the Western Isles, but otherwise the winds, say, a lot lighter than today. Slowly but surely, I'm hopeful that the skies will tend to brighten. We might just see a little bit of drizzly rain drifting across eastern England around the middle of the day, but that should fade out, and mostly the cloud will tend to lift and break, and we'll see a few brighter spells coming through, and it will be milder. Temperatures more widely in the mid to maybe even high teens, 16, 17 possible, where we do see some sunshine. Wednesday, well, we'll see a weather front moving into the northwest, so things turning wet again over the Western Isles, the Highlands, some rain getting into Northern Ireland through the afternoon. Otherwise, again, a lot of dry weather, but still fairly cloudy conditions, not quite as mild on Wednesday, but still we'll see those temperatures getting into the mid-teens for many of us. Bye for now.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
you, Britain, for making GB News Radio such a huge success. Whether you're in the car, on the go, or listening at home, thank you for choosing us as your radio station.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Use caution on the A9 Kessock Bridge, where high winds affect driving. In Hartlepool, a broken down vehicle on the A19 southbound between the A179 and the A689 has one lane closed. On the M25 anti-clockwise between junction 30 and junction 29, queues are building with 10-minute delays. In South Wales, the A4232 northbound is slow from the A48 interchange to the M4 at junction 33. And on the trains, Avanti West Coast is disrupted between Wolverhampton and Stafford, and cross-country has disruption across some routes. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
A camper van and cash could be yours in our very latest Great British Giveaway. You could be driving away in this brand new Benavan 122. This 2026 model, worth over £67,000, comes with all of the mod cons you'd expect. And that's not all, as you'll also get an incredible £25,000 in tax-free cash to boost your bank account this year. For another chance to win a camper van and cash, text prize to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB20 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of May. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
I've been in Westminster for a long time, but I know that though power may be here, its effect on people's lives is across the whole of the country. We may be where rules are made, but it's where they're implemented that matters. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for forthright and frank discussion on where Britain has come from, where it's going, and where it will end up. That's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Vox Populi, Vox Dei.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches.
From football to tennis in the car.
In the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there with the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again.
To start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Very, very good afternoon to you and a happy Monday. It's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live across the UK. All the very latest and the greatest news, debate and analysis all the way through until 6 p.m. We've got a cracking show, and here's what's on today's menu. As oil, gas and petrol prices continue to rocket, today the Chancellor Rachel Reeves will join an emergency G7 meeting to address the deepening cost of living crisis. Plus, in what might be the Labour Party's 16th U-turn, GB News can exclusively reveal that a review into scrapping the sales of new petrol and diesel cars by 2030 will start within a fortnight. And the government is facing fury on two battlefronts today as politicians have awarded pay rises to those on benefits and also to themselves. That's right, benefits soared this week by 6.2%. That's double the rate of inflation. And MPs have awarded themselves a £3,300 cost of living payment. The final insult, you've guessed it, you, the great British taxpayer, is paying for the whole damn lot of it. A blistering new report by the Lib Dems has claimed that phone theft in Britain has effectively been decriminalised, with just 1% of all phone thefts resulting in a police charge. Has the old bill dialed out of trying to stop phone theft, effectively creating a Yobs Charter? And our good old friends at the European Union, they're planning to launch a series of offshore immigrant return hubs in Africa by the end of this year. Now, if illegals can be detained and even ankle-tagged for up to 2 years, should Britain follow suit? And if so, why did the Labour Party scrap the Rwanda returns plan on day one? And millions of British motorists will find out this afternoon if they are entitled to millions of pounds of compensation for missold car finance deals. Could you be in line for a bumper payout? We'll have all the details as a historic ruling is passed, we believe, in about half an hour's time. That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have your company. If you're struggling to fill your petrol tank this week, if you're struggling even with the cost of an Easter egg, spare a thought for parliamentarians. They've given themselves a £3,300 one-off bumper pay rise this week. Not bad, is it? And they've cleared off for 2 weeks' recess. And that's as part of a 5% pay rise, almost twice the rate of inflation. But it gets better. If you're on universal credit or other benefits, 6.2% pay rise for sitting on your backside. And guess what? You, the British taxpayer, is paying for the whole lot of it. Rachel Reeves and Ed Miliband have been in an emergency G7 meeting this afternoon to find out what can be done about the spiralling cost of living crisis. Do you believe in miracles? Well, if so, they could cut fuel duty. Our man Chris Oak will be back here from Wolverhampton, where he was probing the Prime Minister. Get in touch. GBNews.com/your say is the way to do so, or scan the QR code on your screens now. Now it's time for your headlines, and here's Bethany Elsey.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon. Your top stories from the GB newsroom at 4:03. Donald Trump is threatening to obliterate Iran's power plants and oil facilities unless a deal is reached soon. He says the US is in serious talks with what he calls a more reasonable regime, but is warning strikes could hit new targets. He's also repeated threats to seize Iran's main fuel hub as American troops prepare for possible ground operations. But Iran says it would set US troops on fire if that happens. Meanwhile, Pakistan says it's ready to host talks between the two sides in the coming days. Keir Starmer has told supporters the UK would be caught in a war with no plan if opposition leaders were in charge.
This is not our war, and we are not going to be dragged into it. Yes, of course, we will defend British lives and British interests in the region, and we'll stand by our allies in the Gulf region. But we're not going to get dragged in. That's my values, that's my principles, and that's what we've applied to our decisions, whatever the pressure and whoever it's coming from.
The Prime Minister will also hold talks with business leaders in Downing Street over the growing impact of the Iran war. Senior figures from energy, shipping and finance are expected to attend amid warnings the UK could face higher inflation and slower growth. A key concern is Iran's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. That's a vital route for global oil and gas supplies, pushing up costs worldwide. Ministers insist fuel supplies remain stable, but petrol prices have already risen sharply. Conservatives want drivers to be given immediate relief, and Shadow Energy Secretary Claire Coutinho says the Chancellor should scrap a planned fuel duty rise.
Most important thing that people are worrying about when it comes to petrol prices is why on earth Rachel Reeves will be planning to increase fuel duty for the first time in 15 years in the autumn. So that's what we would like to see stopped. We kept fuel duty frozen for 15 years, and this is the exact wrong time to start increasing it, because you're just making life worse for people who are already struggling.
BBC Two presenter Scott Mills has been sacked following allegations about his personal conduct. In a statement, the director of music says the BBC doesn't comment on individual cases, but confirmed he's no longer contracted. His shock exit comes after he signed off his breakfast show last week, saying he'd be back tomorrow. Mills was then replaced the following morning, with colleagues saying they had no further information. The 53-year-old had been hosting the Radio 2 breakfast show since January last year, taking over from Zoe Ball. He previously presented the afternoon slot and has spent years on Radio 1. Counter-terror police are now involved in an investigation in Derbyshire after a car hit pedestrians in the city centre. 7 people were seriously injured and taken to hospital. 2 of them have since been released. A 36-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder and remains in custody. Officers say they're keeping an open mind about the motive. And drivers are being warned to expect the busiest Easter getaway on the roads in 4 years. The RAC says nearly 21 million journeys are planned between Thursday and Easter Monday. That's despite rising fuel prices. Thousands of train trips are also set to be disrupted over Easter by major engineering works, including a shutdown on part of the West Coast Main Line. Those are your latest headlines. Let's have a look at today's markets.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
The pound will buy you just a touch below $1.32 and 1.15 euros. The price of gold is £3,435 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 10,086 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Bethany. Now then, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is meeting industry bosses today amid fears that the Iran war could escalate. Oil prices have surged after Donald Trump suggested the United States could seize Iran's key Carg Island export hub. Now, this comes as ministers order a review into the 2030 ban of new petrol and diesel vehicle sales, which is set to start in a fortnight. Well, I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by our man, our political editor, Christopher Hope, freshly back from Wolverhampton, where you're with the Labour Party and, of course, the Prime Minister for their local elections launch. More of that in a moment's time. All talk now to the cost of living crisis. Report out today saying the price of oil could go as high as $200 a barrel. That's the Egyptian Prime Minister saying that. Currently around about 113, but we're seeing prices at the pumps surge. They're sold out of diesel on the Isle of Man. There's a meeting today with industry business insiders. There's a G7 meeting with Rachel Reeves and Ed Miliband. What's actually going to come out of it? How can the government save people watching this programme some money?
The government's problem, Martin, is they don't know what's going to be the outcome, even a week or 2 weeks away from the Iran war. And the issues they've got with fuel and with petrol are parked for the summer. So from Wednesday, they'll be capping fuel increases. Fuel bills will come down by average about £100 per household, and that runs till June, and then that cap will be lifted, but it'll be the height of summer, so it won't be felt until the autumn. They've got basically a 6-month window to work out how to calibrate and know what they do with Donald Trump and what he's up to. And then you've got this fuel duty, which runs out, of course, the freeze runs out in August. What will the government do outside of a budget? Now, we're looking to Australia. They have cut fuel duty. Other countries too. Ireland is reportedly looking at how to manage petrol demand at the pumps. Keir Starmer, at that launch in Wolverhampton, told reporters today that he thinks there's no need to go out, get petrol, just fill your car normally. The problem is when everyone tries to fill their cars to the brim, even if they're not using them properly, that will trigger a shortage at the pumps. We've seen it happen before in the past, in recent years, and it can happen again, and that's the government's worry. They're trying to manage all of these outcomes. There's a meeting this afternoon with insurers, oil and gas producers like BP, and some big banks too, to try and work out how to ensure that customers aren't being gouged, aren't being exploited by these companies. And tomorrow there's another meeting in Cobra with this meeting room below the Cabinet Office, where they normally look at enemy issues and security issues, but they're using that to look at this issue with concerns about cost of living.
It's all hot air. Where is the concrete action? Well, because the Australians, 50% fuel duty holiday for 3 months. I spoke with Steve Bennett. He's a haulage company owner in Reading in the last hour. He said that'd be perfect. Exactly the kind of thing they need to guarantee their costs. They're talking about closing down entire companies, the haulage sector being annihilated by this. They don't want to hear about 6 months' time. They want to hear about the here and the now. Why would the government just act?
It's not clear what the here and now looks like. We get 2% of our oil and gas through the Strait of Hormuz, mainly from America and some from Northern Europe, Scandinavian countries. That's where we derive our oil and gas. So that's why they're not sure what to do yet. So if they go in too quickly, they'll lose money. Of course, they are making money, the government, because they charge VAT on fuel. They're making a lot of money, and that will go towards the coffers later. But yes, it's concerning. Jet fuel is a problem. There'll be increasingly talk about holiday prices going up because these airlines can't afford to fly you there. Now, there's also concerns about the electric vehicle mandate. Now, one of the results of this is a good thing, I suppose, is there's been a 28% increase in new electric vehicles sold, according to Auto Trader. and a 15% increase in used vehicles. But up to 40 Labour MPs are very concerned about these rising proportions of sold electric vehicles. They're losing money on the forecourt, and that could be threatening jobs. There's a guy called Steve Yem, MP for Mansfield. He has been raising concerns with Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, last week. Here's what he told us last week on our podcast, Chopper's Political Podcast.
Speed and timing and pace question. It's about how do we do decarbonisation without UK deindustrialisation. I want to be able to do. We want to get carbon out of the transport system. Yeah. We're committed to that as Labour MPs. I think that there's a good consensus right from the Parliament.
With the car industry,
but let's not deindustrialise and destroy our industrial power in car manufacturing while we do that. We should not sacrifice that, and I don't believe that we have to.
Now, government sources make it very clear they are sticking with these targets of 2030 ban on new petrol and diesel sales, 2035 mandating everyone to buy a new electric vehicle. They will not change, but support for manufacturers who are very worried about the effect on their workforce and their profit margins, that will maybe change in this review.
We've got the most punitive targets for electric vehicles perhaps on the planet. Why? People don't want these cars. The sales might be going up to corporates, to fleets, but to people at home, if you're a white van man, you can't get an electric van that's going to do the job. They need to surely row back. They've done 16 U-turns. Why not make it 17?
Well, that's what they say they won't do, and I think that's part of the problem, this drive towards net zero, which Ed Miliband is not budging on. He won't come on GB News to tell us why not, but we can try and change his mind as best we can. But he is basically intent on those targets. Rishi Sunak watered them down, but Boris Johnson introduced them at that level 2030, and it's causing real headaches for the motor industry and threatening jobs too, according to Labour MPs, and that's why the government's stepping in to support them too.
OK, Chris, stick with us. I want to get your take on the Labour local elections launched out in Wolverhampton earlier on. But before that, let's get to my next guest now on the energy crisis. I'm delighted to be joined by the business journalist Ian King. Ian, it's always an absolute pleasure to have your company and your expertise on the show. We're at a crossroads. Bills are soaring. People want to see tough, firm action. The government could do something conclusive today, such as cut fuel duty. They probably won't, will they?
No, I mean, Chris just took you... Afternoon, Martin. I mean, Chris just explained very effectively what the Australian government and the Irish government have done. But bear in mind, the finances of both those governments is significantly better than ours in the UK. Ireland only has a debt-to-GDP ratio of 32%. The Australians only have a debt-to-GDP ratio of 50%. Ours is closer to 100%, and we've already discussed on many and many occasions the lack of wriggle room that Rachel Reeves has. She just doesn't have the budget for a great big cut like that. If you were to remove, for example, VAT from domestic fuel bills, I mean, that would cost something like £2.5 billion per year. So she's not going to do that. A cut in excise duty, well, I think, interestingly enough, hearing those comments from Claire Coutinho earlier on, I would not be at all surprised to see Rachel Reeves saying we're not going to go ahead with unwinding that cut to fuel duty that was due to kick in September. Of course, that was introduced by Rishi Sunak as Chancellor when Russia invaded Ukraine. Bear in mind, of course, as Claire Coutinho said, the fuel duty has been frozen since 2011 or 2012 by the coalition government at the time. That has ratcheted up the cost of that. That is a huge giveaway for the Treasury. That costs the Treasury some £6 billion a year now. So adding a further reduction to that it becomes very, very costly for the government at a time when there are other things that they want to do. They want to disincentivize people using their cars right now. And it's interesting, if you look at what some European governments have been doing, Germany, for example, in some parts of Germany now, they're basically making it free to go on public transport as a way to try and get people out of their cars and, as I say, save money in the process.
Lots of great ideas there that probably won't get incorporated by our government, but meanwhile, we're all hostage to the price of oil. It seems to be surging again today. The Egyptian Prime Minister saying it could even go as high as $200 a barrel, nearly double where we are now. We don't know how long this war is going to last. We don't know what uncertainty that will breed, but what we do know, Ian King, is the longer it goes on, the more punishing it gets. And you're painting a picture here of a government that has very little power to do anything about it.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's true. Brent crude, as we speak, is currently around $112 a barrel. It touched 115 earlier on today. There are a lot of comparisons being drawn with what happened when Russia invaded Ukraine and we last got a real oil price shock of this magnitude. But bear in mind, circumstances, certainly for UK households, was very, very different then. We were emerging from the pandemic. You'd had enforced household savings over the prior 18 months when people couldn't go out and socialise, for example. Most people couldn't take a holiday. So most households during the pandemic had built up this big financial cushion that enabled them to ride out the price shock of 2022. That isn't the case this time around. And indeed, it's quite instructive to hear what experts, economic historians are saying. A lot of people now really drawing comparisons with what happened in the 1970s. You had a big oil shock in 1973. You saw collapse in the UK stock market the following year, by the way, and 1979, 1980, when, of course, you had the Islamic Revolution in Iran. And on both of those occasions, that surge in oil prices, that shock to the system, sparked a global recession. And that is the real fear that you're seeing now. The problem that we've got, Martin, is not just the fact that we've got this disruption to oil shipping around the world, the Straits of Hormuz, also the Bab el-Mandeb, which potentially gets closed now that the Yemenis Houthis are starting to fire missiles at Israel as well, and potentially affect shipping in the Bab el-Mandeb. That adds costs to shippers because that would force a lot of them to take their goods, not just oil, but general goods, up the west coast of Africa and up the Cape past the Cape of Good Hope, for example. All of that will add costs to shipping. But it's the fact that you've had this disruption to production as well. You've had, for example, these Iranian attacks on Qatari facilities over the last 10 days or whatever. That is going to take years in some cases to put right, and that will create a long-term shortage of LNG. I noticed over the weekend, Scott Bessent, the US Treasury Secretary, was saying that currently the world was in deficit to the tune of around 12 million barrels of oil per day. That is a severe shortfall if that becomes contracted, and potentially, yes, you could be looking at oil going north of $130 a barrel in the near term, certainly.
OK, thank you very much, Ian King. I think a lot of people might want to go into a coma and be woken up when this is all over. Thank you very much. Not you, not this show. I mean, the economic situation, Ian King. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, giving us your expertise. Thank you very, very much indeed. Now, Chris,
no one's ever going to go to coma watching your show, Martin.
No,
it's full of energy.
Ian King's a magnificent journalist. I'm talking about the general economic malaise. But on a serious point, you're in Wolverhampton today. It was the Labour Party local elections launch. We're covering all parties with equity. What's the mood in the Labour camp?
It's interesting, actually. I thought Keir Starmer, when I bumped into him today, seemed a lot more quite calm. Quite just drilling out his lines. I think he increasingly can see that there's no obvious candidate to replace him. And Andy Burnham isn't around in the Commons. Angela Rayner's got a tax bill, concerns about her ability to be a good minister after Laurie Magnus found against her last September. Shabana Mahmood, maybe, but the left went by it. Nor with Ed Miliband, not even sure he wants the job. So I think he's quite well set. I think the problem he's got is he's not really lifting up in the polls. But he seemed very calm and very... in his very peaceful. No crisis there. I mean, you read about the crisis a lot in the press, but I didn't see it when I'm with him. Of course, he's amongst friends, amongst his about 10 or 12 of the members of the cabinet were there in the front row at the elections launch, but he seems quite calm. I think he goes back, I'm seeing a lot of his commentary now, he's talking about this landslide victory in July 2024. I think he sees that as a personal endorsement of him as a politician. He's hanging on to that, and he's blaming outside events for his troubles at the moment.
But a lot of that popularity seems a very, very long time ago. They're getting pinched from the left by the Greens, they're getting pinched from the right.
And on that, he mentioned the Greens today. He mentioned Polanski. I've never heard him say the way he described Nigel Farage spits the word out. He says the same for Polanski now because his base need to hear that. They are hemorrhaging support on the left of their party.
It's going to be one heck of a long journey till May the 7th. But Chris Hope, thank you very much, and thanks for coming back today. You know, you've had a long day live there up in Wolverhampton for us with the Prime Minister. Thank you very much, Chris Hope. Now, still to come, I'll bring you all the news for millions of people on benefits. It's great news. They're getting an inflation-busting increase this week of 6.2% in their handouts. Not bad, is it? And also coming up next, I'll talk about another reason why we shouldn't give up the Chagos Islands. That's right. Our good old friends at the European Union, they want to snatch the fishing rights there. Why on earth aren't we fishing some of the most fertile waters on the planet instead of simply giving it away to Brussels? That's next on GB News and with Britain's #1 news channel.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pearce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every week there are stories that shape the national conversation.
We'll be discussing that.
And on Saturday Morning Live, we break them down.
Is that true? This is fascinating, isn't it?
The politics, the headlines, the debates everyone's talking about.
And the questions that you want answered.
Do you think that was a legitimate attack for him to make?
What led you to set up this fantastic movement?
You know what? It's a great question, Olivia.
So what are you waiting for?
Your weekend starts here. Saturdays at 10 a.m, only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches,
from football to tennis in the car,
in the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there with the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again.
To start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
As soon as it hits 11 and the headlines come in,
Late Edition brings you the breaking news from all the front pages.
because the news is going to happen.
So get a head start today.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, Late Edition.
Alex Armstrong Tonight, Late Edition. From 11 o'clock every night.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:24. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now it's time now for the great British giveaway. Brace yourselves. How would you like a brand new camper van in time for the summer? That's worth 76 grand. Not only that, your bank could have 25 grand in tax-free moolah all on top. Here's the details for your chance to make it all yours.
We want you to enjoy unlimited Great British Getaways this year in your very own camper van. That's right, you could be the proud owner of a brand new Benevan 122. This very latest 2026 model comfortably sleeps 4. Comes complete with built-in kitchen, compact washroom, front dinette, and is worth over £67,000. So if you're travelling with family or holidaying with friends, you know you'll be staying in comfort. But that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £25,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like in the coming year. Make sure you don't miss out on a prize package worth over £92,000. For another chance to win a camper van and cash, text prize to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB20 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of May. The winner may be contacted live after all entry routes have closed. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good luck. Now to the very worrying and some might say utterly perplexing claims that the European Union could seize fishing rights in the waters around the Chagos Islands. The Chagos Islands. Keir Starmer still wants to transfer sovereignty of the British territory to Mauritius, despite strong opposition from Donald Trump and other political parties in this country. But it gets worse, because now it's feared that the deal could lead to French and Spanish fishing vessels accessing those ultra-rich and beautiful marine... Look at those ecosystems. They're gorgeous. They're packed full of fish, and we're simply giving them all away. Well, we're now joined by Tessa Clark, who's the editor of the Chagos Files. Tessa, welcome to the show. Just when you think the Chagos deal can't get any worse, any more utterly cretinous and perplexing, we now learn that those bountiful oceans around the Chagos Islands packed full of high-value fish that we could sell for billions of pounds annually, they're simply going to be given away to the European Union.
Well, the Chagos sovereignty deal has been fraught with difficulties, U-turns, contradictions. It's true. And this seems to be like the latest one. But actually, the Labour Party, in a sense, have put themselves in their own sort of small corner about this, because it was actually a Labour government that created the Marine Protection Area, the MPA, in 2010. And since then, the Foreign Office have instructed the British Indian Ocean Territory officials to protect marine diversity, which means that there is heavy restrictions on fishing. And this was something that has had cross-party support in the sense of protecting the environment is a common cause amongst all the parties, although there's differences, obviously, in supporting net zero. But, you know, the fact is that the MPA wasn't just created to protect the fish. It was said to be created also to keep Chagosians off the islands in the name of protecting fish. So it's interesting to know that in 2013, the government released, the Guardian newspaper released WikiLeaks cables. It was a big thing at the time, lots of WikiLeaks cables. And one of them showed that the MPA was said to have been set up to keep Chagosians out. And a senior British Foreign and Commonwealth Office official was said to have stated in the cables that ensuring a marine reserve would make it, quote, difficult, if not impossible, for former inhabitants, meaning the Chagosians, to pursue resettlement claims. And apparently a US official was said to have agreed with that strategy. So it was a green political strategy in order to stop Chagosians reclaiming their homeland and resettling. It undermined and weakened their case, it was said. This has never been confirmed by the Foreign Office at the time or since, but it was something that I know because when I first spoke to Chagosians back then, it's when I first got involved in this story. Okay. They had actually very, very sad and upsetting to hear the news that the fish restrictions would be there, because it means they couldn't go home, because how could they live? How could they sustain themselves? Fishing was part of their way of life.
And Tessa, yet now, here we are, there's always an opportunity when a contract is renegotiated, and you can bet your bottom dollar whether it's an opportunity, Brussels will be salivating at the prospect. They already have access to fishing rights and waters around the Seychelles, Madagascar and Mauritius. Mauritius, if they're handling control of these waters, it could be a done deal. They do a deal with Brussels, £6 billion worth annually. Those waters are worth and that includes yellowfin tuna, high-value fish. You can bet your bottom dollar now, Mauritius will water this down, they'll give it away to Brussels. We not only lose the islands, we lose billions of pounds. Can this get any more ridiculous?
I think that the whole politics of the Chagos Islands from the government's point of view, if we follow what the government says itself, they are doing this not because it's a financially beneficial issue for them and for all of us, but because it's a question of national security, that they see decolonialising the Chagos Islands as the only way forward because of international legal agreements. So in terms of the fish and protecting the whole area, you know, it's true that the treaty does not contain anything that says Mauritius should definitely protect marine wildlife, and it should not protect the seas. The MPA is still in place. And actually, Mauritius last December, though, did announce that they would not allow just complete fishing like any other area. But it is a huge area to fish in, potentially. 640,000 kilometres, which apparently is half the size of France. And I would say for the Chagossian people themselves, who are both living on the islands at the moment and campaigning, who want to retain the sovereignty as British, they see the fishing issue in different ways, depending on which groups you talk to. So some obviously want to show that, hey, we want to be on the Chagos Islands. You can trust us with the fishing. We will fish sustainably. Okay. And others saying, yes, obviously we want to be able to make some money and make a living out of it.
Tessa Clark, we've run out of time. We have to nip it in there, but thank you very much for joining us. Tessa Clark, the editor of the Chagos Files, worth pointing out the European Union has faced previous accusations of damaging and depleting fishing grounds on the West African coastline, the Mauritius, Senegal, Sierra Leone and Ghana. And by the way, they did that to British waters, super trawlers, electric pulse fishing. It was the Brexiteers who cared about protecting eco-marine systems. Why never the Remainers did, and why now doesn't this government? Astonishing situation. Now, a Foreign Office spokesman has told GB News this: the Chagos Marine Protected Area is one of the most important and unique marine environments in the world, and both the UK and Mauritius are committed to its protection. And we welcome the announcement from the Mauritian government on the 3rd of November that no commercial fishing will be allowed in any part of the marine protected area. But the point is, the area around that area is massive, and Brussels has got its eyes on it. Lots more still to come between now and 5 p.m, including we'll hear from the former government minister who's branded the BBC anti-British after its latest controversial decision to axe its royal coverage, including that of the cenotaph. First, here's your latest news headlines with Bethany Elsey.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon. The headlines, the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister is meeting business leaders in Downing Street to talk about the impact of the Iran war amid rising oil and gas prices. It comes after Donald Trump says the US could take the oil in Iran, including seizing its main export hub, Hog Island. Radio 2 presenter Scott Mills has been sacked from the BBC following allegations about his personal conduct. The BBC says it doesn't comment on individual cases, but has confirmed he's no longer contracted. A man has appeared in court charged with the murder of Dennis Donaldson in County Donegal in 2006. Donaldson, who was a former key figure in Sinn Féin, was shot dead months after he admitted he'd been an informant for the police and MI5 for over 2 decades. Antoine Duffy has been remanded in custody until his next court appearance in 2 weeks. And the father of rugby league legend Rob Burrow has died. Jeff Burrow passed away after a period of ill health. Leeds Rhino says he was a tireless campaigner for the motor neuron disease community, continuing his work even after his son's death in 2024. You're up to date. I'll be back with more at 5 o'clock.
Take the GB News family with you on any device. As long as you have an internet connection, tune into GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond.
Afternoon and welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow starting off fairly dull and damp and drizzly in places, but should get brighter as the day goes on and feeling a bit warmer than today. At the moment we've got high pressure down to the southwest trying to move in, but actually these weather fronts are just toppling over the top of that high, and they'll bring increasing cloud this evening to Northern Ireland and Western Scotland with a little bit of drizzly rain coming in here. Seen a few showers through the day today. They're becoming confined to East Anglia and Kent, but even here they tend to disappear after midnight. But here comes that thicker cloud bringing the damp and drizzly conditions, but also meaning it will be a milder night compared to last night. A fairly grey start though on Tuesday morning. The rain won't be heavy at all. It'll just be light drizzly stuff mostly around western fringes, so perhaps a hint of brightness to begin with over East Anglia and the southeast, but mostly it'll be quite cloudy. Certainly over the hills of Wales it'll be a bit damp, and same goes for the hills and mountains of northwest England and western Scotland. Again to the east we may start off with a little bit of brightness, but for most it'll be a grey start. Won't be as windy as today across Scotland. A bit of a breeze blowing over the Western Isles, but otherwise the winds, say, a lot lighter than today. Slowly but surely, I'm hopeful that the skies will tend to brighten. We might just see a little bit of drizzly rain drifting across eastern England around the middle of the day, but that should fade out, and mostly the cloud will tend to lift and break, and we'll see a few brighter spells coming through, and it will be milder. Temperatures more widely in the mid to maybe even high teens, 16, 17 possible, where we do see some sunshine. Wednesday, well, we'll see a weather front moving into the northwest. So things turning wet again over the Western Isles, the Highlands, some rain getting into Northern Ireland through the afternoon. Otherwise, again, a lot of dry weather, but still fairly cloudy conditions. Not quite as mild on Wednesday, but still we'll see those temperatures getting into the mid-teens for many of us. Bye for now.
Thank you, Britain, for all of you who listen to GB News Radio.
Whether you're at home or on the go, you're making us Britain's news channel and Britain's radio station.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBnews.com. On the M8 westbound at Junction 8, the off-slip is restricted after a broken-down vehicle. On the A42 northbound between the M42 and Junction 12, one of two lanes is closed for a breakdown. In Bristol, the M32 southbound between Junction 1 and Junction 2 has a lane shut due to another broken-down vehicle. The A4232 northbound from the A48 interchange to the M4 junction, 33 is slow with congestion. And on the trains, Avanti West Coast and Cross Country report major disruption between Wolverhampton and Stafford. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Time is 4:38. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, we're thrilled to say once again that GB News Breakfast has once again been nominated for the Best News Programme at the Trick Awards. Now, Breakfast have won this award for the past 3 years on the bounce, and the team couldn't have done it without you, our loyal and beautiful audience. But here's the thing. We need you to vote for Breakfast once again if you think that we should win this year, which of course you do. Now, you can vote now by scanning the QR code on your screen or by going to poll/trick.org.uk. Thank you so much. You know what to do. Get voting for Breakfast. Now, moving on, there's great news today if you're on benefits or if you're a member of Parliament, because your income is rising sharply. In fact, it's almost twice the rate of inflation for millions of people, and it's gone up more than double the rate of inflation. 6.5 million are on universal credit, and they're getting an increase of 6.2% at a time when inflation is at 3%. Well, members of Parliament, they're also putting their snouts in the trough because they'll see their income go up by 5%. Now, this includes a 3.5% increase for the cost of living. Nice work, isn't it, if you can get it? Well, I'm joined in the studio by one man who's so angry about this, he made the front page of the Daily Mail today. It's William Yarwood, who's the Media Campaigns Manager at the Taxpayers Alliance. William Yarwood, welcome to Westminster. Always a pleasure. Let's start with benefits. The government said they were going to clamp down on benefits to ease the cost of living crisis. Not only did that fail spectacularly, they're actually going up by twice the rate of inflation.
Indeed, and you think about where the cost of living adjustment for taxpayers is in all of this, because they're clearly not getting one. Look, this government failed on welfare reform miserably, and they were going to cut about £5 billion off the overall bill for over this Parliament. And now, because of this increase and the failure to do any welfare reform, it's now going to be, wait for this, £407 billion. £407 billion by the end of this decade. And all I hear from many people on the left, and even some people on the right, saying, well, you know, actually, there's a reason for this, and actually we can afford this, and this is just a part of living in a decent moral society. Welfare grows and grows and grows upon every single year, and actually the biggest area in which this is growing, Martin, is actually in the disability section. And I'm not talking about like people who've got no legs, no arms, in wheelchairs and the like. 40% of that increase is going to be disability benefits, and a lot of that is going to be due to ADHD, anxiety and other mental health issues. And my question to anybody is, how can we afford this?
And the bottom line is, we can't.
Yeah.
In the long term.
Absolutely.
However, the political will to attack this, to cut it, seems to be totally non-existent. And I wonder if there's anything to do with the fact that at the same time, a nice 5% pay rise for the parliamentarians.
Yeah.
Again, sneaked through on the last week of term. Here they are, parliamentarians, $3,500 almost a year better off.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that's been appalling is no MPs really coming out and rejecting this pay rise. If they wanted to show some solidarity with the British people watching at home, who are going through a cost of living crisis, seeing their energy bills spike, Also due to government policy on net zero, seeing their tax burden increase, with many people being dragged into higher tax rates due to the freezing tax thresholds at the last budget. You think that MPs might actually wake up and think, oh, you know, maybe we should show some solidarity with the British people on this one, and maybe we shouldn't take more of their money to put in our back pockets. But nope, they're taking this, and by the end of this decade, Martin, they're going to be earning over 100 grand a year. And yeah, it's great work if you can get it. And my question is, Martin, do most of these people really deserve it? I think your viewers at home know what the answer to that one is.
It's a funny thing, because Rachel Reeves last week ruled out any blanket measures to help families cope with their energy bills or the cost of living crisis. And today they're having a meeting with G7 leaders. They're having a meeting with energy insiders. But there's no sign of any relief. There could be lots of things they could do. We talk how often about a fuel duty cut. Australia just introduced a 50% one-off 3-month cut being lapped up by voters there. I spoke with a guy called Stephen Bennett running Bennett's Haulage in Reading earlier on. They're seeing a tank of petrol, £300 extra for every tank. They're going bust. They're crying out for that kind of one-off fuel duty cut, William Yard. Why don't we get it?
Because there's no political will, but also I think Reeves may want to squeeze a little bit more money out of the ordinary British taxpayer. Not just to pay for welfare, but to pay for other things, the growing cost of illegal migration, the growing cost of legal migration, the cost of their net zero projects. I mean, this government is just a tax and spend government, which way you want to cut it. And the idea for them of cutting a tax is completely alien, even if it would help the people that they propose to represent, which is supposed to be taxpayers, motorists and hard-working people.
It's fair to say that the previous governments as well, the Conservative government, gave us the highest taxation since World War II. We've had decades of high tax, high spend governments. Is there any way, the current predicament we're in, the biscuit tin's empty? We don't have energy sovereignty.
No.
It's not likely anytime soon that there's going to be a cost of living cut by this government, is there? In fact, they're getting rich off petrol, off oil, off diesel, because over 50 pence in every pound is taken by the government. They're the biggest profiteer from petrol prices going up.
When people talk about price gouging, and I get really irritated with this, like the biggest price gouger of fuel is the government. Like, fact. For half of your fuel, half of what you pay at the pump is fuel duty, and also VAT on top of that fuel duty, which is completely crazy. So we at the Taxpayers Alliance have called for extending the fuel duty freeze, having it cut, and also disapplying VAT to fuel duty, which would actually make working people's lives a lot easier in this crisis. And this argument, again, oh, these are global crises, we can't do anything. As you just said earlier, Martin, Australia just cut fuel duty and it went down very well. I think in their currency it cost about 1.3 billion quid. If we can't find 1.3 billion pounds in our country to make sure that motorists, taxpayers aren't hit by a global crisis which is not their fault, then really what is the point in this government at all?
What we could do, William Yarwood, is cut some of that £407 billion from benefits. And we could do that.
We could do that.
And we could help motorists. We could help those who go to work. We could help those who get out of bed when the alarm clock goes off and fills their diesel tank in their white van. Their haulage company goes out to work. But it seems we have a budget teed up for the work shy.
Yeah, absolutely. I said in the Daily Mail this morning, it feels like Britain is a two-tier state, essentially, where people like politicians and benefit claimants are essentially insulated from the economic shocks and hardships that ordinary taxpayers have to feel. And I've got a big question, how long is this going to last before taxpayers start doing quite dramatic things like leaving this country altogether?
Well, William Yarwood, you're doing all your work to make sure people stay awake to it. Please don't leave the country anytime soon, though. We need you here. William Yarwood, Taxpayers Alliance, always a pleasure, never a chore. Thank you very much for joining us here in Westminster today. Thank you very much. Now, regarding the increase in benefit payments, Rachel Reeves said last week, I would argue that the progressive universal approach that we are taking is the right one. £150 off everyone's energy bills, but then targeted support for those who need it the most. And onwards, MPs' pay is decided by the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority. Their chair, Richard Lloyd, has said this. In reaching our decision for 2026-27, we have benchmarked MPs' pay against other responsible senior roles in civic society and similar worldwide democracies, as well as considering our own core principles and the wider economic context. Well, coming up next, the BBC is cutting costs, but one former government minister says its latest decision is anti-British. You'll join me next, but meanwhile, if in search of some holiday sun, then here is a forecast for some of the top European destinations.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
A very unsettled spell of weather expected across the Mediterranean. Heavy rain here, but elsewhere, particularly across Western Europe, largely fine. The Canary Islands, much of Spain and Portugal, lots of fine settled weather and some sunny spells. But as we drift our way further eastwards, we can see this area of low pressure bringing in some widespread heavy outbreaks of rain, particularly across parts of Italy and also moving into parts of Greece. The unsettled weather is here to stay for the coming days, but across much of Spain and Portugal, remaining fine, sunny with some warm temperatures.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It is 11 o'clock in the evening here. The Oscars wound down a few hours ago and the great and the good are now partying in hotels across this city. But it was a night with actually less controversy perhaps than people might have thought. There was a lot of barbed comments. It was very snidey in its approach. There was a sort of presumed liberalism from everybody in the room, but nobody really had the backbone to say what they wanted to say. The host, Conan O'Brien, I mean, establishment with a capital E, a rather lizard-like man, you might say, was hosting the evening. And of course, he didn't hold back on making a few swipes at the administration. And in fact, the UK came into his focus quite early on because he said, look, it's one of the first years that we've got no British actor nominated for Best Actor or Best Actress. He said, but at least you arrest your paedophiles. To roars of laughter in the crowd, as though this is something that nobody in that room has ever had anything to do with, and there's no one in that room who went to Epstein Island, is there? So it was a night of hypocrisy, to be honest, Ellie and Mark. For a lot of GB News viewers, we would have been much more interested in the politics going on than necessarily the winners and the losers. And it genuinely begs the question, a night like tonight, is how much longer the Oscars has. How relevant is it to the younger generation? This was the 98th awards tonight, and a lot of people were wondering whether it would make it to its 100th year, because we live in an age now, of course, where the younger generation don't really have the attention span to watch a whole movie.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Breaking news, live updates, stories that matter.
From the heart of the GB newsroom to every corner of Britain, with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News bulletins are there to deliver the latest news that matters to you.
Bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 to 5. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, the BBC has been accused once again of being anti-British, this time over its plans to make massive cuts to the department that is responsible for its major royal events. Now, BBC Studios Events Productions has covered King Charles's coronation and, of course, the majestic funeral of Queen Elizabeth II in recent years. Well, the former Arts Minister, Sir Michael Ellis, has said the BBC's decision is anti-British. I'm delighted to say he joins me now. Sir Michael, it's always a pleasure. The BBC is cutting off its crown jewels. Sounds painful.
Yeah, Martin, and it's painful for the viewers. Look, this is an anti-British decision by the BBC, and it's not the first one along these lines that they've made. They can make cuts from so many different wasteful departments that they have. I mean, they sent 550 people, Martin, to the Glastonbury Festival to cover that. 550 people. And yet they think they need to cut 8 people from the department that broadcasts the royal ceremonial events. It's a political decision. It's a lefty political decision that they've made. They want to cut coverage of majestic broadcasts like Trooping the Colour, like the Remembrance Sunday events. They want to cut their coverage of events like the late Queen's funeral and the Jubilees and so on. And this is something for which they are famous around the world and have been for generations. Their reputation is already shot in so many different areas, particularly, of course, in news coverage. But now they want to damage their reputation further by making these savings. What about making savings amongst their executive branch? They have enough executives at the BBC to run a small country. In fact, we did run small countries with fewer officials in our Foreign Office and Colonial Office than they have now at the BBC, and they can't run an organisation. What concerns me is that viewers like those on GB News now will miss out on coverage that they enjoy seeing. But of course, they always have GB News to turn to for their coverage of ceremonial events.
And so, Michael, I was about to interject that you've now become very much the voice of those events for us here. So you win some, you lose some. We're delighted to have won you onto our channel. But on a serious point, this is about choices. They've made a choice to pare back on the patriotic content. They've made a choice to send more Wallace to Glastonbury.
Yes, and I mean, this is about 8 or 10 people running this department, which has been award-winning, by the way. Only last week, they won a Royal Television Society award for their coverage of Holocaust Memorial Day last year. So it's an award-winning department known for its broadcasting of these major ceremonial events, which are enjoyed around the world. They even have an American audience. Donald Trump is known to love the pomp and circumstance and ceremony of the British state. And yet that's the department they choose to cut. How about sending a few hundred fewer people to the Glastonbury Festival, as I say? I mean, what we have here, Martin, is a question of decisions. And they've made a decision to ignore that part of their audience that enjoys these events, enjoys watching them, respects the coverage of Remembrance Sunday, VE Day, VJ Day, that we all covered on GB News last year. And, you know, the reality is they've made this decision as well, interestingly, just before their new Director General is appointed. Why not wait until he steps in May? They've made it, just in case I think he disagrees, they've made it just before he gets there.
Yeah, I think you could have a point. On the bright side, Sir Michael, I look forward to seeing you on the next patriotic coverage here on GB News. Magnificent. Thank you very much, my old friend, Sir Michael.
Thanks, Martin.
Now, a BBC spokesperson has told GB News this: as a prudent commercial business with a mandate to maximise returns to the BBC, we regularly look at how we're set up and where we can work more efficiently. So there we go. Now, stick with us. This is GB News Presentation. Soon I'll be joined by a Labour MP and a Tory MP for their take on the cost of living crisis. How can they fix it? Or will they just give themselves another pay rise? First, though, here's your weather with Alex Deakin.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Afternoon and welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow starting off fairly dull and damp and drizzly in places, but should get brighter as the day goes on and feeling a bit warmer than today. At the moment we've got high pressure down to the southwest trying to move in, but actually these weather fronts are just toppling over the top of that high, and they'll bring increasing cloud this evening to Northern Ireland and Western Scotland with a little bit of drizzly rain coming in here. See a few showers through the day today. They're becoming confined to East Anglia and Kent, but even here they tend to disappear after midnight. But here comes that thicker cloud bringing the damp and drizzly conditions, but also meaning it will be a milder night compared to last night. So a fairly grey start though on Tuesday morning. The rain won't be heavy at all. It'll just be light drizzly stuff mostly around western fringes, so perhaps a hint of brightness to begin with over East Anglia and the southeast, but mostly it'll be quite cloudy. Certainly over the hills of Wales it'll be a bit damp, and same goes for the hills and mountains of northwest England and western Scotland. Again, to the east we may start off with a little bit of brightness, but for most it'll be a grey start. Won't be as windy as today across Scotland. A bit of a breeze blowing over the Western Isles, but otherwise the winds, say, a lot lighter than today. Slowly but surely, I'm hopeful that the skies will tend to brighten. We might just see a little bit of drizzly rain drifting across eastern England around the middle of the day, but that should fade out, and mostly the cloud will tend to lift and break, and we'll see a few brighter spells coming through, and it will be milder. Temperatures more widely in the mid to maybe even high teens, 16, 17 possible, where we do see some sunshine. Wednesday, well, we'll see a weather front moving into the northwest. So things turning wet again over the Western Isles, the Highlands, some rain getting into Northern Ireland through the afternoon. Otherwise, again, a lot of dry weather, but still fairly cloudy conditions. Not quite as mild on Wednesday, but still we'll see those temperatures getting into the mid-teens for many of us. Bye for now.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Thank you, Britain, for the thousands of you who are becoming friends of GB News each and every week.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. On the A1 northbound near Wakefield, from the A639 to the junction with the M62, all lanes are shut after a crash, with recovery expected around 5:45 this evening. On the M56 eastbound between Junction 7 and Junction 6, one lane is blocked by a broken down vehicle, easing by 5:15. On the M32 southbound between Junction 1 and Junction 2, a breakdown is slowing traffic, clearing by 5:30. And on the trains, Avanti West Coast and Cross Country have disruption between Wolverhampton and Stafford. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
You could be the proud owner of a brand new Benevan 122. This very latest 2026 model comfortably sleeps 4, comes complete with built-in kitchen, compact washroom, and is worth over £67,000. But that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £25,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like in the coming year. For another chance to win a camper van and cash, text prize to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB20 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of May. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, this is Jubes & Co with you.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie is here. GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device, and as long as you have an internet connection. Tune in to GB News, anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I've been in Westminster for a long time, but I know that though power may be here, its effect on people's lives is across the whole of the country. We may be where rules are made, but it's where they're implemented that matters. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for forthright and frank discussion on where Britain has come from, where it's going, and where it will end up. That's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Vox Populi, Vox Dei.
Very, very good afternoon to you, and I hope you're having a happy Monday. It's 5 p.m. Welcome to the Moss and Daubney Show here on GB News, broadcasting live across the UK for you. We've got all the very latest and the greatest news, debate and analysis all the way through until 6 p.m. We've got a corking show, and here's what's on today's menu. Now, it's just been announced in these past few moments that there is £7.5 billion is to be paid out by firms after the courts found that firms broke the law by failing to disclose important information to customers. Now, this, of course, is car finance compensation, the huge scandal just broken in these past few moments. £7.5 billion is up for grabs. How could you get your claws into it? Will you be in line for a payout? I'll be discussing that next with a finance expert. Now, meanwhile, as oil, gas and petrol prices continue to soar, today the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has joined an emergency G7 meeting to address the deepening cost of living crisis. Plus, in what might be the Labour Party's 16th U-turn, GB News can today reveal exclusively that a review into scrapping the sales of new petrol and diesel cars by 2030 will start within a fortnight. And a blistering new report by the Liberal Democrats has today claimed that phone theft in Britain has effectively been decriminalised, with just 1% of all phone thefts resulting in a police charge, as the old bill dialed out of trying to stop phone theft, creating a de facto Yobs Charter. And here's a question: why is modern comedy just completely and utterly unfunny? Well, I'll be joined by the comedian Paul Cox to discuss this phenomenon, or the jokes falling flat. That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have your company this afternoon. As the cost of living crisis steepens, there could be some good news for millions of motorists. £7.5 billion of compensation for those missold car finance has just been revealed, literally in these past few minutes. Could you get your claws into some of that money? I'll be joined by a motoring finance expert to walk you through how you could get a payout. And don't we need one at the moment? Today we found out benefits claimants will get a 6.2% pay rise. That's twice the rate of inflation. Parliamentarians gave themselves a 5% pay rise, £3,300 extra this year. Not bad, is it? Not bad to give yourself a pay rise if you work in Parliament. Not bad to get a pay rise if you sit on your backside claiming benefits. What about the rest of us who go to work, set our alarm clocks? We're the ones paying for all this. Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say is the way to do so. You can scan the QR code on your screens right now. But enough from me. Here's your headlines with Bethany Elsey.
Martin, thank you. Good evening. Your top stories from the GB newsroom at 5:03. The Prime Minister has told business leaders tackling the economic impact of the war in Iran must be a joint effort.
This is going to have to be a joint effort. The government can't do it on its own. You can't do it on your own. We're going to have to work together on this, which is why I wanted to have the conversation here this afternoon.
The talks with chiefs from the energy, shipping and finance sectors comes amid warnings that the UK could face higher inflation and slower growth as Iran continues to blockade the Strait of Hormuz. Attacks in the vital shipping lane have led to rising oil and gas worldwide, with oil now costing $115 a barrel. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is threatening to obliterate Iran's power plants and oil facilities unless a deal is reached soon. He says the US is in serious talks with what he calls a more reasonable regime, but is warning strikes could hit new targets. He's also repeated threats to seize Iran's main fuel hub, Haag Island, as American troops prepare for possible ground operations. But Iran says it would set US troops on fire if that happens. Pakistan says it's ready to host talks between the two sides in the coming days. And earlier, Sir Keir Starmer has told supporters the UK would be caught in a war with no plan if opposition leaders were in charge.
This is not our war, and we are not going to be dragged into it. Yes, of course, we will defend British lives and British interests in the region, and we'll stand by our allies in the Gulf region. But we're not going to get dragged in. That's my values, that's my principles, and that's what we've applied to our decisions, whatever the pressure and whoever it's coming from.
In other news, BBC Radio 2 presenter Scott Mills has been sacked following allegations about his personal conduct. In a statement, the BBC's Director of Music says the company doesn't comment on individual cases, but has confirmed he's no longer contracted. His shock exit comes after he signed off his breakfast show last week, saying he'd be back tomorrow. Mills was then replaced the following morning, with colleagues saying they had no further information. The 53-year-old had been hosting the Radio 2 breakfast show since January last year, taking over from Zoe Ball. He previously presented the afternoon slot and spent years on Radio 1. A man has appeared in court charged with the murder of Dennis Donaldson in County Donegal in 2006. Donaldson, who was a former key figure in Sinn Féin, was shot dead months after he admitted he'd been an informant for the police and MI5 for over 2 decades. Antoine Duffy, who's in his 40s, was charged with murder, possession of a shotgun and the possession of ammunition on the same dates and location as his death. He's been remanded in custody until the next court appearance in 2 weeks. And counter-terror police are now involved in an investigation in Derbyshire after a car hit pedestrians in the city centre. 7 people were seriously injured and taken to hospital. 2 of them, though, have since been released. A 36-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder and remains in custody. Officers say they're keeping an open mind about the motive. Those are your latest news headlines. Let's have a look at today's markets.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
The pound will buy you just a touch below $1.32 and 1.151 euros. The price of gold is £3,455.10 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 10,117 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you very much, Bethany. Now, the Prime Minister today met with industry bosses amid fears that the Iran war could escalate. Now, during a round table at Downing Street, Sir Keir Starmer said we had a duty to protect British people's concerns.
So it's not our war, but it is our duty to protect British citizens. Particularly, their concern will be not just the escalation of the war, but this sense that it's going to hit them and their families and their households. And I think probably uppermost in their minds at the moment is energy bills. Petrol and also food prices. On household energy bills, as you've probably seen, we've already taken action for the time being, and therefore this Wednesday household energy bills will go down by just over £100 on average and then stay down until the end of June, whatever happens in the conflict. But we need to look at what else needs to be done, what else can be done, and that's why I wanted to talk to you.
Now, bear in mind, the Prime Minister and indeed every other parliamentarian got a £3,300 pay rise this week. Not bad, is it? Now, this comes, of course, as a new study out today reveals that half of UK households are being forced to use savings to pay for essentials as the cost of living continue to rise. Oh, we're really all in this together. Well, I'm delighted now to be joined by the Conservative MP for Gordon, and that is Harriet Cross. Harriet, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have your company. The Prime Minister didn't seem to come out with anything particularly concrete there. We learned the great revelation that everything's getting more expensive. Our petrol, our heating, our food, and yet nothing concrete was delivered to try and bring the cost of living down. If you were in power, Harriet Cross, what would the Conservatives do?
Yeah, no, it's good to be here. Thank you. And we're used to this from the Prime Minister. They're very good at pointing out what's happening, but not necessarily what the solution will be. Unlike the Conservatives, who today have been calling for the need to increase drilling in the North Sea. We've had Kemi Badenoch up in Aberdeen on a drilling rig, just pointing out just how important the North Sea is to the UK, whether that's for jobs or energy security, but also for investment and tax return. And that tax return is vital because there's £25 billion of tax which is being left under the North Sea because of Labour's policies. And if they were to reverse the windfall tax, to scrap their mad ban on new drilling licences, permit Jackdaw and Rosebank, that tax could come into the Treasury and could be spent to help reduce bills for everybody in the country.
It's worth pointing out, though, Harriet Cross, that the energy levy duty, taking it to almost 80% on North Sea, that was introduced by Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak. That's a Conservative tax.
So, I mean, we certainly were the party who brought it in back in 2022 when prices spiked significantly higher than they have now, and also at a time when many other countries also were. But since then, and since coming to power, Labour have increased the levy. They increased it up to mean that oil and gas companies are now paying 78%. They also extended it out to 2030. And we're the only country left in the world with a windfall tax on oil and gas, which means that investment is leaving the UK, it's going to other countries overseas, which is leading us to have reduced production from the North Sea and losing thousands of jobs. 1,000 jobs a month are being lost from our oil and gas sector. because of the government's policies, which they have, as I said, made worse in terms of the oil of the energy profits levy. They've increased it. They've also put in this ban on licences. So everything regards to the North Sea is getting worse under Labour, and that is because Ed Miliband is at the helm, and he is driving their idealistic energy policy, which seems completely allergic to anything that is British oil and gas. They'll import oil and gas from abroad, but they will not use our own oil and gas from the North Sea.
Harriet Cross, a great many people watching this show will totally agree that we are committing economic self-suicide by not drill, baby drill, by not going for shale, by not cutting tax on North Sea, by not extending licences. But you could have done all of that in power, and you didn't.
Well, we never banned new licences.
You increased the taxation on North Sea. It was your policy idea. It has got worse in the Labour Party, but the net zero targets, they were religiously zealotry pursued by Boris Johnson's government. The Conservatives brought them in.
The energy profits levy, which I said we did bring in when prices were spiking in 2022, that had an end date. That end date was extended by Labour, and the rate of tax was increased long after oil and gas companies were seeing record profits. Until the last month, oil and gas had been down in sort of the $60 a barrel, 70 pence a therm range, which was well below where even this government had defined their own levels, which they classified as a windfall tax, yet they extended it and increased it. I'm absolutely not saying we got everything right, and I think the party have said that numerous times. But what I am saying is that Labour have made the situation with the North Sea 10 times worse, and that is why we've seen Kemi throwing her full weight behind North Sea drilling. She was always, as I think you'll agree and recognise, she was one of the few speaking out about net zero when she was first in Parliament, long before I got elected. She's been very firm on this, very strong on this. She does not see the North Sea as something that we should be running away from. It's something that we should be embracing. It is a vital asset for the UK. It's a vital asset for our energy security, and we completely support it. And that's why you saw today Kemi up in Aberdeen announcing policies such as scrapping the energy profits levy, ending this mad ban on new licences, and making sure that Jackdaw and Rosebank are permitted without any more delay.
It's good to see that Kemi Bain would like to scrap a policy that the Conservatives brought in. You know, we can all learn lessons and move on. That's great. In the here and the now, what would the Conservative Party do? Licences would take a long time. I mean, right away, if you're in power today and you're in that roundtable meeting today, what would the Conservatives do to bring down the cost of living? What about fuel duty cuts? I mean, let's just get stuck in.
Well, just firstly, back to licensing, Jackdaw and Rosebank, they can be producing by the end of the year. So there is this perception that all new licenses are going to take 10 years to produce. That's not correct. Jackdaw and Rosebank can be producing oil in Rosebank's case, gas in Jackdaw's case, by the end of this year. Similarly, there's things that are called tiebacks or infill wells. Again, they can be producing in just a couple of years. There's a lot that we can be doing in even the short term, which will increase production from the North Sea. It's a very convenient sort of fantasy, which I know a lot on the left and sort of the people who don't want any more production from the North Sea say that it's going to take so long to get out, but it's not relevant. That's not correct. We can be producing a lot more, a lot sooner than any of these projections. In terms of fuel duty, as Kemi has said, and as we had a debate on in Parliament very recently, we want Labour to end this idea that they have of freezing fuel duty in September. They want to put it up by 5 pence at exactly the wrong time. We've said that that's completely wrong. The whole way through our time in government, we made sure that fuel duty was frozen, because we recognise just how important it is for hauliers, for people getting to and work, getting to leisure, particularly people in rural areas who travel a lot more distances. Right. It's vital that they are not being priced out at the pumps, and that is something that the government can do. They can commit today to not ending the freeze on fuel duty in September, and that's exactly what we've said we would do.
OK, Harriet Cross, Conservative MP for Gordon, thank you very much for your time today on GB News. I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Now, we've been covering all of the parties' election launches for the local elections, and we've spoken with the party leaders, and I'm delighted now to be joined by Sarah Coombs, who she's the Labour Party MP for West Bromwich. And Sarah, welcome to the show. And we heard from Sir Keir Starmer this morning in Wolverhampton as the Labour Party launched their local election campaigns. Tell us all about your strategy. It could be a tough road ahead for you.
Hi, well, very nice to be with you. And yes, we had a big launch in Wolverhampton earlier in the heart of the Midlands, which was great. Lots of enthusiasm. We think that the big priorities for people in this country is obviously dealing with the cost of living. We recognise there are incredibly tough times, and that is exactly why the government already acted to take £100 on average off people's energy bills. That'll be in effect from next week, and that's protecting people till the end of June. We've obviously massively taken a lot of money off people's childcare bills, saving them about £7,000 a year. We've had huge reductions in the NHS waiting list. In my area, it's a 25% reduction in the NHS waiting list since we got elected. So we understand the country's facing tough times, and we think that we've got people's priorities in mind. We know we're really improving public services, and that is exactly what the Prime Minister was talking about today. And, you know, people are worried about what this impact, what the war in Iran is going to have, the impact here in the UK. And I think the Prime Minister has been very strong, saying this is not our war. We do not understand the plan and the legal basis, and therefore we are not going to jump in head first to this war like the Conservatives and Reform would have us do, which is not only dangerous for British troops, but also sends our cost of living soaring. So we were not in favour of doing that. And so what we want is de-escalation, and we're absolutely protecting people on the cost of living. So that's what the Prime Minister was talking about today, and he got a very good reception in Wolverhampton.
Sarah, do you think we should do something more immediate to help people in the here and the now? For example, we've seen in Australia, very deft of foot. They've cut their fuel duty by 50% as a one-off 3-month holiday to help motorists right here, right now. Shouldn't we do something similar here? Just do something quick, effective and targeted?
Well, we've actually already done something. So in Australia, obviously, they didn't have what we had, which is money off energy bills, which we announced at the autumn budget, which is coming to effect next week. So actually, that was really prescient from the Chancellor and from the Prime Minister. Australia didn't have that. We've already done that. We've also acted on heating oil. So, you know, my constituency is urban. We're all on the gas network. But if you're in the countryside and you rely on heating oil, that cost was going through the roof. So the government immediately put in place £50 million to help people. So we have actually already done a lot of things, and people's energy prices are going to be protected until the end of June. We also continue to freeze fuel duty. So we have actually put in place things that have protected people at this time. And I think that's going to make a difference.
Could I ask you, Sarah Coombs, about benefits are being increased this week by 6.2%. A lot of people believe that we should be cutting benefits to try and help the public purse. The incredible cost of benefits, £407 billion per annum by the end of this decade. Surely the answer is to cut benefits, to give us more money. But the Labour Party seems to be handing out payments to the work-shy.
Well, look, the Labour Party believes in work, and that we think the best way out of poverty is work. The thing that's best for people is work. And so we absolutely believe in that. And so, of course, we want people who can work to be getting a job, and we're helping them to get a job. But the reality of the welfare system overall is that a lot of people who receive benefits are in a job. They actually do have a job, but they don't make enough money to live on because the housing costs in this country are incredibly high and have been incredibly high for a long time. And these are the things that is making the bill go up and up. And of course, you know, part of our welfare bill overall is obviously the pensions bill. And, you know, the Labour Party is committed to looking after older people in this country. So when you talk about the welfare bill overall, you obviously have to understand that pensions and our ageing population is part of that entire bill as a whole. But obviously, the Labour Party believes in work. And we inherited, when we came into government, what is a scandalous situation that 1 in 8 young people did not have a job and was not in college. And I think that is absolutely scandalous. And we are investing a lot in ensuring that those young people can get a job, because if you start off life not having a job, then it impacts you the entire way through. So we need to fix that.
Sarah Coombs, can I ask you a cheeky final question? And it's this. Everybody is in it together. We're all feeling the pinch on our bills. And yet parliamentarians have been given a 5% pay rise, £3,300 extra for people like yourselves. Is that really in keeping with the cost of living crisis? Are we really all in this together?
Well, look, you know, we did get given that pay rise by an independent kind of organisation that sorts it out. But I think that's the reason why we need to have targeted support in this cost of living crisis. I don't think, frankly, that people like myself, who will not feel the pinch of this cost of living crisis and this Iran conflict, as some people will, I don't think we should all be given money like some other parties want us to give everyone money. I don't think that would be fair. When there are people who are struggling, who are working hard, who really are feeling much worse than we would be. So that's why I think the Labour Party believes in sort of targeted action during this crisis.
Sarah Coombs, it was a cheeky question. And by the way, I would not turn down a £3,300 pay rise myself. I had to ask her, though, Thank you very much for coming today. I've really enjoyed it. Sarah Coombs, Labour MP for West Bromwich, thank you very much for your time today on GB News. Now, still to come, compensation payouts are due on around 12.1 million unfair car finance deals, and that could mean a £829 windfall for each and every one of you. Could you be entitled to a payout? Let's try and help you find out. That's next here on GB News with Britain's #1 news channel.
As soon as it hits 11 and the headlines come in,
Late Edition brings you the breaking news from all the front pages.
because the news is going to happen.
So get a head start today.
Patrick Christie's tonight, Late Edition.
Alex Armstrong tonight, Late Edition. From 11 o'clock every night.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every week there are stories that shape the national conversation.
We'll be discussing that.
And on Saturday Morning Live, we break them down.
Is that true? This is fascinating, isn't it?
The politics, the headlines, the debates everyone's talking about.
And the questions that you want answered.
Do you think that was a legitimate attack for him to make?
What led you to set up this fantastic movement? You know what? It's a great question, Olivia.
So what are you waiting for?
Your weekend starts here. Saturdays at 10 a.m. only on GB News.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
I've been in Westminster for a long time, but I know that though power may be here, its effect on people's lives is across the whole of the country. We may be where rules are made, but it's where they're implemented that matters. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for forthright and frank discussion on where Britain has come from, where it's going, and where it will end up. That's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Vox Populi, Vox Dei.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From court mornings
To warm family brunches.
from football to tennis in the car,
In the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there with the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again. To start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:24. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, could you be in line for a bumper payout? Well, let's get more now on that huge story that I broke at the top of this hour, and it's this. More than 12 million British motorists are in line to receive part of a £9.1 billion payout scheme after they were missold dodgy car finance agreements. Now, drivers could receive an average of £829 each. Wouldn't that be lovely? After today's announcement by the Financial Conduct Authority. Could you be waiting to take delivery of 830 quid? Well, let's now. I'm joined by my next guest. That's the personal finance expert, Gemma Godfrey. Gemma, welcome to the show. God knows, people watching this show think, oh my God, I would love 830 quid right here, right now. Tell us who could be eligible, and if so, how do they apply?
Well, the thing that's quite interesting about this is it's still worth applying because potentially you could be due this money. And it's quite broad in terms of the people that could be captured by this. So you may be able to claim compensation if you bought a vehicle via a hire purchase or via a personal contract purchase as well, between April of 2007 and November of 2024. So that's quite a wide range, a time range. And the issue here is if you weren't informed that the dealer was paid a commission, particularly via, and excuse the terminology here, but a discretionary commission arrangement. And what this all means is, when you actually borrowed money to be able to finance the vehicle that you're purchasing, was there actually an agreement with a lender where actually they could have been incentivized for you to be charged a higher interest than you would otherwise have, because everybody then earned more money from your deal? So this actually, the FCA was trying to ban this type of arrangement, and this is why you could be due compensation, because you could have been charged too much interest on that loan. And look, most new cars and many second-hand ones as well are bought with finance agreements. So this could capture, 12 million households in the UK that could be due compensation.
Gemma, you've got my full attention, because I've just realised that this includes me, and my missus wants to go on holiday. So if I decide this could apply to me, what happens next? How can I get my claws on some Wonga?
Well, the important thing to do is to try and gather the information. So I would go back. I can talk about, I'm not giving you personal advice here at all, but for people in general, to go back and to try and find the paperwork would be really important, because you want to understand the numbers in your agreement, who the lender was, to be able to make the claim as straightforward as possible. Now, the regulator is saying they're trying to make this process really straightforward, but you can lodge a claim with your lender to see whether you're eligible. And what's interesting is some people that have been rejected before are still being encouraged to try again, because they may still be able to get compensation. And there is like a 3 to 5 month potential implementation time for lenders to be able to get their ducks in a row, but they have actually started to put money aside in order to pay this compensation. And in terms of timeline, it is coming out that people could be paid out in the majority by the end of this year, with the rest of most people by the end of next year. So it is quite timely to be able to get in your claim.
That could be a nice little Christmas box. Now, I'll tell you one thing. I keep getting all these text messages, emails saying, oh, you're entitled, click here. I'm assuming, Gemma, that means if I say, oh, yes, would you mind doing all the spade work for me? That means the people offering the service will take a hefty cut. Should people beware they click on these links, or is that just an easy way, a no-win, no-fee, might as well chuck your hat in the ring and have a pop?
Oof. OK, let me just say there are two concerns with that. One is that, of course, if somebody is in the middle, so a middle person, and again, they can help you with the process, but they will have their own fee, so you will get slightly less back. But the one that I'm slightly more worried about is this whole idea of if you get a text, you click a link, because there are lots of scams around. And the advice has been that these lenders will reach out to you. But what I would always say is check and validate the link, any links before you check that actually it's coming from a reputable source. And that's also why actually you reaching out directly yourself is probably the safest option than waiting for anything to do with links. I mean, banks usually tell you when they call you up that, not to provide any advice or any of your personal details, and they'll try and verify things online. But I am a bit worried about scams here, because a lot of people are going to be quite interested in the money. It's desperate times as well, with the cost of living going up. So I would be wary around any scams of people clicking links or anything.
Gemma Godfrey, very, very good advice, because people like me that see 830 quid for not doing quite a lot might start clicking on any old stuff because, hey, human nature being as it is. But in terms of the precedent set by this, as well as people getting payments, what does it mean for the regulation around car finance in general? I mean, it seems pretty dodgy this was allowed to even happen in the first place, Gemma.
Well, I mean, there has been a lot of more recent regulation coming in which focuses on the consumer and the rights that you have as a consumer, and the fact that you should be delivered the right outcomes. And absolutely, what we're talking about here was activity that's going against that. So something that would really incentivize lenders to charge a higher fee because again, everybody would be earning more money. That's not in the best interest of consumers. Again, and this is what the allegations are saying. So absolutely, the way that the direction of travel is very positive, which is let's protect consumers, let's make sure that people understand what they're paying, that there's real transparency around fees, that people understand. I mean, people should be given an opportunity to understand the fees, shop around, and definitely not have anything that is hidden fees hidden amongst the paperwork, which it sounds like potentially could have happened here and should not be happening going forward.
But it could be very, very good news. Around 14 million deals, we understand, were sold. 44% of all deals since 2007 were unfair and therefore eligible. So if you're watching there, check your deals. You might be in for a nice little windfall. Gemma Godfrey, thank you so much for being level-headed and trying to dampen down my enthusiasm about a nice payout. Let's not click on any dodgy links. Gemma, wonderful. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today. Appreciate your expertise and your time. Thank you. Now, lots more still to come to now and 6 p.m, including reaction to the staggering news that less than 1% of mobile phone theft offences, 1%, less than 1% of them are even solved, let alone result in a police charge. Astonishing. But for now, if you're travelling home from work or from school, as I always say, please stay safe. Here's your traffic and your travel update, and please stick with us.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. On the A9 Forth Road Bridge, take extra care with strong high winds. On the M4 eastbound, an incident has closed a lane between Junction 28 at Tredegar Park and Junction 27 at High Cross. In Cheshire, the M6 southbound has a broken down vehicle with one lane closed between Junction 17 and Junction 16. In Warwickshire, the A5 southbound is queuing by around 40 minutes between the A51 and the junction with the M42. And on the trains, Avanti West Coast and Cross Country have disruption between Wolverhampton and Stafford. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB newsroom at 5:30. The Prime Minister is meeting business leaders in Downing Street to talk about the impact of the Iran war amid rising oil and gas prices. It comes after Donald Trump says the US could take the oil in Iran, including seizing its main export hub, Hague Island. BBC Radio 2 presenter Scott Mills has been sacked following allegations about his personal conduct. The BBC says it doesn't comment on individual cases, but has confirmed he's no longer contracted. Counter-terror police are supporting officers in Derbyshire after 7 people were injured when a car hit pedestrians. 2 have now been discharged from hospital. Detectives are continuing to question a 36-year-old suspect and are keeping an open mind on the motive. Labour MPs are calling for clearer food labelling to help shoppers support British farmers. They say current rules can be misleading about where products actually come from. And the father of rugby league legend Rob Burrow has died. Jeff Burrow passed away after a period of ill health. Leeds Rhinos say he was a tireless campaigner for the motor neuron disease community, continuing his work even after his son's death in 2024. You're up to date for now. Let's get back to Martin.
For all the latest from GB News whilst you're on the go, get the GB News app. Scan the QR code now to download or visit gbnews.com/app.
Afternoon and welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow starting off fairly dull and damp and drizzly in places, but it should get brighter as the day goes on and feeling a bit warmer than today. At the moment we've got high pressure down to the southwest trying to move in, but actually these weather fronts are just toppling over the top of that high, and they'll bring increasing cloud this evening to Northern Ireland and Western Scotland with a little bit of drizzly rain coming in here. See a few showers through the day today. They're becoming confined to East Anglia and Kent, but even here they tend to disappear after midnight. But here comes that thicker cloud bringing the damp and drizzly conditions, but also meaning it will be a milder night compared to last night. So a fairly grey start though on Tuesday morning. The rain won't be heavy at all. It'll just be light drizzly stuff mostly around western fringes, so perhaps a hint of brightness to begin with over East Anglia and the southeast, but mostly it'll be quite cloudy. Certainly over the hills of Wales it'll be a bit damp, and same goes for the hills and mountains of northwest England and western Scotland. Again to the east we may start off with a little bit of brightness, but for most it'll be a grey start. Won't be as windy as today across Scotland. A bit of a breeze blowing over the Western Isles, but otherwise the winds, say, a lot lighter than today. Slowly but surely, I'm hopeful that the skies will tend to brighten. We might just see a little bit of drizzly rain drifting across eastern England around the middle of the day, but that should fade out, and mostly the cloud will tend to lift and break, and we'll see a few brighter spells coming through, and it will be milder. Temperatures more widely in the mid to maybe even high teens, 16, 17 possible, where we do see some sunshine. Wednesday, well, we'll see a weather front moving into the northwest. So things turning wet again over the Western Isles, the Highlands, some rain getting into Northern Ireland through the afternoon. Otherwise, again, a lot of dry weather, but still fairly cloudy conditions. Not quite as mild on Wednesday, but still we'll see those temperatures getting into the mid-teens for many of us. Bye for now.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Welcome back. Time is 5:36 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, President Donald Trump has vowed to totally obliterate Iran's energy infrastructure, saying that the US may blow up and completely obliterate Iran's electric plants and oil wells if a deal to end the war is not reached and the Strait of Hormuz is not opened. We'll join now to discuss this. GB News' chief US correspondent from outside the White House there, Ben Leo. Ben, welcome to the show. Situation is getting more grave in Iran, threats now to blow up oil, gas and even water plants.
Yes, President Trump turning the screw again this morning, taking to Truth Social in an apparent bid to get the Iranians to come to a deal. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt this morning has called a surprise press briefing here at the White House behind me. That's happening in about 20 minutes' time. And actually just behind me, you won't be able to see, but outside the Eisenhower Executive Building, I've seen a flurry of what appear to be 4- and 5-star generals with Secret Service agents getting into cars. It looks like there's been lots of activity going on. So it would suggest something is happening with regards to the Iran war. We'll find out more in 25 minutes from Caroline Leavitt with this surprise press briefing. Normally the briefing comes on a Wednesday, but earlier this morning she surprised a lot of the White House reporters here by saying it would happen at 1 o'clock local time. President Trump taking to Truth Social this morning saying that the United States, Martin, was in a serious discussion with the new Iranian regime, which he said could end our military operations in Iran fairly shortly. He wrote on Truth Social, "The US is in serious discussions with a new and more reasonable regime to end our military operations in Iran. Great progress has been made, but if for any reason a deal is not shortly reached, which it probably will be, and if the Hormuz Strait is not immediately open for business, we will conclude our lovely stay in Iran by blowing up and completely obliterating all of their electric generating plants, oil wells and Karg Island, which we have purposely not touched yet." Well, earlier today, Martin, just following that, an Iranian foreign ministry spokesman said that the demands from the US to come to any sort of deal had been excessive and unreasonable. Tehran said it had no direct negotiations with the US up until this point, only through indirect intermediaries. This is having a massive effect, Martin, on the markets all around the world, not least here in the United States. Oil now exceeding $115 a barrel, petrol prices, gas prices here going up. That's a headache for the administration when it comes to the cost of living. The midterms coming up as well. How do they explain that to people taking to the polls? And also in the United Kingdom, petrol prices going up. There are fears if this continues, if oil continues to surge, you could see something like £2 a litre for unleaded, which is completely unprecedented. Keir Starmer this morning meeting with business leaders on how they can tackle the potential crisis coming along. And although Keir Starmer says, again, he's reiterated this morning on X saying, Britain is not involved in this war, I'm standing firm, he's found his big boy boots. Unfortunately, indirectly, he is involved whether he likes it or not, because Britain's reluctance, the West's reluctance to help the US with the Strait of Hormuz, that is affecting economies all around the world, cost of living all around the world, including in Great Britain. So Keir Starmer has something to think about there. Jordan, just to show you how this is affecting nations all around the Middle East, Jordan today has announced that government buildings in the country have now banned air conditioning, such as the sort of scarcity of oil and gas and electricity. All aircon in Jordan, which is a hot country, of course, now off. So they'll need their fans there. But Martin, the press briefing takes place in 25 minutes or so. We'll see what happens. Maybe we could see potential news of a deal on the horizon. But for now, President Trump, as I said, turning the screw, saying that if Iran doesn't come to a deal soon, he'll start blowing up their key energy infrastructure.
And Ben Leo also here threats to blow up Iran's water plants, which of course would then directly, in effect, place a siege on the population of Iran. Water, let's face it, is more important than oil. It would completely put the regime under a huge turn of the screw. A lot of critics might say that's an inhumane thing to do. The rhetoric is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. This war's not going away anytime soon, Ben Leo.
Yeah, he's included the desalination plants in that post as well, so the key water infrastructure. I'll have to say, I'm not sure how much the Iranian regime, the Islamist despots, would care about their civilian population not having access to water. I mean, they slaughtered 30 to 50,000 civilians in January and February, so I don't think they'll care too much whether civilians have access to water. But it would affect, logistically, the energy infrastructure as well. You don't just blow up the oil infrastructure and the gas plants and the refineries. You need water as well to make sure the oil keeps getting produced. So I think that's what President Trump's talking about. It's interesting, though, hearing this kind of rhetoric from Trump this morning. My assessment is that President Trump, although the likes of Steve Witkoff, the Middle East peace envoy, told me some weeks ago on the Late Show Live on GB News, there would be no situation, no circumstance in where the markets would get too hot, too volatile, where President Trump would be forced to find an off-ramp to end this war early. That's what he insisted to me. I get the feeling this morning that this pressure, this kind of turning the screw to get a deal over the line, maybe comes off the back of the economic situation, which is now persistent and maintaining and potentially getting worse. Brent crude now $116 a barrel. So I think those two are connected, Martin.
Okay, Ben Leo, superb there, live for us from the White House. Thank you very much. Make sure you tune into Ben Leo from midnight on GB News. Thank you very much, Ben Leo there, our man in Washington. Now back to domestic politics. Recent data has revealed that only 1%, less than 1% of all mobile phone theft offences across England have even resulted in any form of police charge. Now, critics are saying that criminals feel safe in the knowledge they won't be caught. So, should police be focusing on clamping down on phone theft, or should they concentrate on more serious crimes? Well, I'm delighted now to be joined by the former London police officer and the director of the Law and Order Foundation, great friend of the show, Norman Brennan. Norman, welcome to the show. It's always a pleasure to have your company. Liberal Democrats are saying that basically mobile phone theft now is de facto decriminalised. Do you agree?
Well, absolutely, I do. And to the 112,000 people that had their phones stolen, Martin, they will think it's a very serious crime. I'll cut to the chase. When you actually look at burglaries as well, only 92% are undetected, which means that 92 out of every 100 people that report a burglary don't get the police, they don't get an investigation, and no one is arrested or put before the courts. How bad is it really, Martin? I'll tell you how bad it is. It is so bad that we need a royal commission and a complete overhaul of not just policing, but in the entire criminal justice system. Knife crime is out of control. Shoplifting is an epidemic. People's tools are stolen from their vehicles every day. Vehicle theft is out of control. Antisocial behaviour is out of control. The grooming gangs, we all know about that. And what happens, this government come into power, they are now reducing tens of thousands of those that were in prison for the right reasons, even earlier than they should. They're now decriminalising knife crime by saying to youths that are responsible for the majority of murders and stabbings that you won't be arrested and put before the courts if you're under 17 or under 18. That is decriminalising that. And the early release scheme just epitomises what an appalling lot that we've got in power. And the caveat to all of that, Martin, is I've been in policing and law and order for almost 5 decades, longer than probably anyone in policing and law and order in Britain. This is how serious it is. So bad that I believe the Prime Minister, the Justice Minister, Lamy, and Shaboom Mahmood should be put before the courts with the criminals for malfeasance. And malfeasance is a failure of those in power, in public office, who do not have the ability to stop people coming into Britain and the streets being unsafe. That is how serious it is, and I am not joking.
Norman Brennan, very, very strong words. And when you see the picture on the screens of just people, random hooded hoodlums on scooters, on e-bikes, on mopeds, going past bus stops, snatching people's phones, it's not a petty crime. It destroys people's confidence in society. It breaks that confidence of trust. We used to live in a high-trust society. Many people feel that's being eroded away. They sincerely do. And these crimes make people feel that the country is simply not a shadow of its former self, and perhaps neither is policing. A full review perhaps in order. Norman Brennan, we have to leave it there, short but sweet. Former London police officer and the director of the Law and Order Foundation. Norman Brennan, thank you once again for your time here on GB News. Much, much appreciated. Now, coming up next, that's a question that's been bugging me for years. Why are modern comedians like Nish Kumar just not funny? He's about as funny as hemorrhoids. Meanwhile, if you're in search of some holiday sun, here is the forecast of some of the top European destinations.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
A very unsettled spell of weather expected across the Mediterranean. Heavy rain here, but elsewhere, particularly across Western Europe, largely fine. The Canary Islands, much of Spain and Portugal, lots of fine settled weather and some sunny spells. But as we drift our way further eastwards, we can see this area of low pressure bringing in some widespread heavy outbreaks of rain, particularly across parts of Italy and also moving into parts of Greece. The unsettled weather is here to stay for the coming days, but across much of Spain and Portugal, remaining fine, sunny with some warm temperatures.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
As soon as it hits 11 and the headlines come in, the Late Edition brings you the breaking news from all the front pages. Because the news is going to happen. So get a head start today. Patrick Christie's tonight, Late Edition. Alex Armstrong tonight, Late Edition. From 11 o'clock every night. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Pork pies. They're widely regarded as a classic British snack dating back to the 18th century.
But Tesco's recent survey found that a third of youngsters have never tried the savoury treat.
Outrageous. So the retailer have now released a limited edition pork pie-inspired sandwich. Here it is here. We've got one procured to try it out. But the idea of this is to give the youngsters of today all the chance to enjoy this nostalgic British classic, even if it's not a real pork pie, but a sandwich that has been flavoured as such.
That's a load of processed meat flattened together, like a slice of it. There's a slither in there with a bit of cheese. We're joined now by the owners of Fuller's Butchers and Farm Shop, Steve Fuller and Lily Fuller. Welcome.
Basically, we make our own pork pies. We sell about 400 a week, and yeah, I mean, to me, I'd say they're becoming more popular. Actually, I mean, they're a great snack. You can take them on a picnic. You've got the nice crispy pastry and the nice juicy pork meat inside. So
now I can see you're holding up those pork pies. We have got pork pies flavoured sandwiches here. I wonder if it's time to do a bit of a taste test. Perhaps you could bite into your pork pie there in your farm shop. We'll have a bite of this Tesco sandwich and see how it all feels. It's not going to be great for the listeners on the radio, but here we go. I think they've captured the essence of one. This is an excellent I can't speak with my mouth full of sandwich.
You ate too much, that was where you
I
went
did.
wrong.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 to 6. Now, here's a question that's been bugging me for years. Is modern comedy utterly rubbish? Is comedy simply gone down the toilet compared to the good old days, the likes of Les Dawson and the like? Well, let's now speak with GB News' contributor and the comedian, Paul Cox. Paul, welcome to the show. Now, you're, of course, not at all rubbish, but a lot of people are saying that modern comedy is so right on, so liberal, so tiresome. It's about as funny as hemorrhoids.
Well, yes, you have to define how funny hemorrhoids can be, because, you know, if you're not the victim, they can be incredibly funny. But what I would say about modern comedy in particular is a lot of the comedy that you see, particularly on your television screens, is predicated by the fact that there is a bunch of sort of BBC, liberal elite, North London types that are choosing the future of comedy for everybody else to see. I know this because I've been in the comedy industry since about 2014. And when I was a new comic, you do things like New Act of the Year competitions. And you can see when you do those, and I made a couple of finals, you can see when you do those that they are choosing specific types of characteristics to fit a future narrative. They are very much lining out and saying, we want one of those, two of those, three of them, and four of the other. They're not hardly ever saying, is this meritocracy? Who is the funniest? And as a result, the probability of you, the viewer, getting the best possible comedian is low, as is demonstrated by everything we see on our screens now.
Yeah, and also it's always like the jokes are always about Donald Trump or Boris Johnson or Brexiteers being stupid. They always seem to punch in the same direction.
Yeah, look, it's very state-sanctioned, unfortunately, which means, you know, satire is supposed to poke fun at the establishment. If you look at every successful comedian currently, they all agree with the establishment. So that it's just inertia. They're feeding the machine themselves. Everybody's getting to hear what the producers of this particular comedy genre want you to hear. Someone like myself or Leo Kearse, for instance, are going to get nowhere near the BBC because we're on record for criticising A, the BBC, and B, the establishment. And that's why we get on so well on GB News.
You're exactly right. Thank you very much for joining us, Paul Cox. Superb. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Always a pleasure, never a chore. Now, thank you very much. Now, don't forget, there's always the punchline on Jubes & Co., the queen of primetime debate. Michelle Dewberry is up next. Jubes, what's on your menu?
Hey Martin, good programme as always. Well, there's loads of stuff that we need to discuss tonight, as you would expect, but I also want to ask you about property. Are you over the age of 60? Do you own your own property? It's shown now that half of properties are owned by people 60 plus. Do you think that's a problem? And if so, what is the solution? What do we do about it? Is there anything that would make you downsize your home? You might even be sitting there thinking, hold on, why should I have to? Michael Gove, Kevin Craig and me after the break.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Afternoon and welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow starting off fairly dull and damp and drizzly in places, but should get brighter as the day goes on and feeling a bit warmer than today. At the moment we've got high pressure down to the southwest trying to move in, but actually these weather fronts are just toppling over the top of that high, and they'll bring increasing cloud this evening to Northern Ireland and Western Scotland with a little bit of drizzly rain coming in here. Seen a few showers through the day today. They're becoming confined to East Anglia and Kent, but even here they tend to disappear after midnight. But here comes that thicker cloud bringing the damp and drizzly conditions, but also meaning it will be a milder night compared to last night. A fairly grey start, though, on Tuesday morning. The rain won't be heavy at all. It'll just be light, drizzly stuff, mostly around western fringes. So perhaps a hint of brightness to begin with over East Anglia and the southeast, but mostly it'll be quite cloudy. Certainly over the hills of Wales, it'll be a bit damp, and same goes for the hills and mountains of northwest England and western Scotland. Again, to the east, we may start off with a little bit of brightness, but for most, it'll be a grey start. Won't be as windy as today across Scotland. A bit of a breeze blowing over the Western Isles, but otherwise the winds, say, a lot lighter than today. Slowly but surely, I'm hopeful that the skies will tend to brighten. We might just see a little bit of drizzly rain drifting across eastern England around the middle of the day, but that should fade out, and mostly the cloud will tend to lift and break, and we'll see a few brighter spells coming through, and it will be milder. Temperatures more widely in the mid to maybe even high teens, 16, 17 possible, where we do see some sunshine. Wednesday, well, we'll see a weather front moving into the northwest. So things turning wet again over the Western Isles, the Highlands, some rain getting into Northern Ireland through the afternoon. Otherwise, again, a lot of dry weather, but still fairly cloudy conditions. Not quite as mild on Wednesday, but still we'll see those temperatures getting into the mid-teens for many of us. Bye for now.